Victoria Hale's hands trembled as she stared at the ivory wedding invitation. Her ex-boyfriend was getting married, and she'd just done something desperate. She'd asked a complete stranger to be her date. Not just any stranger, a single father she'd met exactly once, whose daughter had spilled juice on her designer shoes at a cafe 3 days ago. Now, sitting across from him again, she realized she might have made the biggest mistake of her life. Or perhaps, without knowing it, the best decision she'd ever made. Before we dive into the story of unexpected connections and second chances, I want to invite you on this journey with me. Stay until the end to see how a fake relationship becomes something neither of them planned for. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's begin. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canvas awning of Riverside Cafe, casting soft shadows across the outdoor seating area. Victoria Hale sat perfectly still, her spine straight, her hands folded on the wrought iron table before her. To anyone passing by, she looked composed, professional, in complete control. Her charcoal blazer was tailored precisely, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her expression carefully neutral. Inside, she was screaming. Across from her, Ethan Miller wiped orange juice from his daughter's hands with a patience that seemed endless. His movements were practiced, automatic, the choreography of a parent who'd done this 1,000 times before. He didn't look frustrated or embarrassed. He simply cleaned the mess, smiled at his daughter, and continued their conversation as though nothing had happened. Victoria found herself studying him, trying to understand the calm that radiated from him like heat from summer pavement. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 5'10", 5'11", but he carried himself with a quiet confidence that filled the space around him. His brown hair was slightly too long, falling into his eyes when he leaned forward. He wore jeans and a simple gray Henley, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. There was paint, actual paint, on one of his shoes. He was nothing like the men in her world. Nothing like Richard. The thought of her ex-boyfriend's name made Victoria's stomach clench. Richard Ashford. Even now, 8 months after their breakup, the memory of his final words to her felt like a knife between her ribs. "You're too much, Victoria. Too driven, too focused, too cold. I need someone who knows how to be present, how to be warm. Someone who wants more from life than just the next quarterly report." She'd stood in the doorway of the apartment they'd shared for 2 years and watched him pack his belongings into designer luggage. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged. She'd simply watched, her face a mask, while her heart shattered into pieces so small she wasn't sure she'd ever find them all. Now Richard was getting married to Melissa Cunningham, a yoga instructor with a lifestyle blog and an Instagram following that rivaled some celebrities. Melissa, who posted about gratitude and mindfulness and the importance of being present. Melissa, who was everything Victoria apparently wasn't. The wedding invitation had arrived at her office 2 weeks ago, forwarded by her assistant with a sticky note that read, "Should I RSVP regrets?" Victoria had stared at the elegant script, the embossed gold lettering, the venue. Clearwater Vineyard, one of the most exclusive wedding destinations in the state. She should have declined. That would have been the sensible choice, the professional choice, the choice that protected her pride and her sanity. Instead, she'd checked the box that read "will attend" and added +1 in the space for her guest. The problem was she didn't have a +1. She didn't have a boyfriend, didn't have a casual date she could call on, didn't have anyone in her life who could convincingly play the role of the man who'd helped her move on from Richard Ashford. For 3 days, she'd panicked quietly, professionally, allowing no one to see her distress. She'd considered hiring an escort. She'd actually researched agencies, gotten as far as filling out a contact form, before deleting it in disgust. She'd thought about asking Marcus Chen from her finance department, who'd asked her to coffee twice before reading her polite refusals correctly. She'd even briefly considered going alone, head high, showing Richard she didn't need anyone. But the thought of walking into that vineyard alone, of facing Richard's pity and Melissa's sympathetic smile, of enduring whispered conversations about poor Victoria still single, it was too much, even for her. Then 3 days ago, she'd stopped at this cafe after a particularly brutal board meeting. She'd needed air, needed space, needed 5 minutes away from quarterly projections and shareholder expectations. She'd ordered a black coffee and found a quiet table in the corner. That's when Ethan Miller's daughter had crashed into her table at full speed. The little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with wild curls and paint-stained overalls, had been running from the counter to her father's table when she'd tripped over absolutely nothing. Her cup of orange juice had launched into the air in a perfect arc, most of it landing directly on Victoria's cream-colored Louboutins. Victoria had frozen, watching orange liquid pool around her feet, waiting for the familiar surge of irritation, the sharp comment that usually came so easily when things didn't go according to plan. But then she'd looked up and seen Ethan Miller drop to his knees beside his daughter, not checking the mess, not apologizing to Victoria, but simply asking in the gentlest voice, "Are you okay, sweetheart? Did you hurt yourself?" The little girl had shaken her head, tears welling in her eyes, not from pain but from embarrassment, and Ethan had pulled her into a hug, kissed the top of her head, and said, "Accidents happen. You're okay. We're okay." Only then had he looked at Victoria, still kneeling on the cafe floor with his daughter in his arms. "I'm so sorry about your shoes. I'll pay for cleaning, replacement, whatever you need. Emma's still working on her coordination." Victoria had found herself saying something she never said. "It's fine. Really, they're just shoes." Ethan had looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Then he'd smiled. Not the polished, networking smile she was used to, but something genuine and warm and slightly surprised. "That's kind of you. Most people wouldn't be so understanding." He'd helped Emma clean up the spill while Victoria sat there, her meeting forgotten, watching him move around his daughter with practiced efficiency. He'd apologized 3 more times. She'd waved it off 3 more times. And then, as he was gathering their things to leave, something had possessed her to speak. "Wait." He'd turned back, Emma's hand in his, both of them looking at her with identical expressions of polite curiosity. "I'm sorry, this is going to sound strange," Victoria had said, her voice steady despite the absolute chaos of what she was about to do. "But I have a situation, and I think you might be able to help." Now, 72 hours later, she sat across from him again at the same cafe, trying to explain why she'd hunted down his business card. He'd given it to her, insisting she send him the cleaning bill, and called him to arrange this meeting. "Let me make sure I understand," Ethan said slowly, his daughter now happily coloring in a book beside him, orange juice safely in a sippy cup. "You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend at your ex's wedding?" "Date," Victoria corrected. "Not boyfriend, just someone I'm seeing, someone who makes it clear I've moved on." "Because you haven't moved on." It wasn't a question, and Victoria felt her defenses rise automatically. "I've moved on professionally, personally, in every way that matters. I just don't want to walk into that wedding alone and become an object of pity." Ethan studied her with those steady brown eyes, and Victoria had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen through, like he could read every insecurity she was trying to hide beneath her polished exterior. "Why me?" he asked finally. "You probably know dozens of men who'd jump at the chance to attend a fancy wedding with you. Why ask a stranger?" Victoria had prepared for this question. She had a dozen reasonable answers ready. He seemed trustworthy. He clearly knew how to behave in social situations. He looked the part. Instead, what came out was the truth. "Because you'll leave." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly. Victoria pressed forward, her voice controlled but quieter than before. "Anyone I know, anyone from my world, they'd want something. Networking opportunities, business connections, an in with my company. Or they'd tell people, turn it into gossip, make it into something it's not. But you have your own life, your daughter, your work. You don't need anything from me. After the wedding, we'll go back to being strangers, and that will be that." That's pretty cynical. That's pretty realistic. Ethan sat back in his chair, his hand absently smoothing Emma's curls as she concentrated on coloring a butterfly purple. Victoria waited, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. This was insane. She was a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and she was sitting at a cafe begging a stranger to be her fake date. "What would this involve?" Ethan asked. Victoria pulled out her phone, calling up the details she'd already memorized. "The wedding is in 3 weeks, Saturday afternoon at Clearwater Vineyard. Ceremony at 4, reception following. It's black tie optional, so a suit would be appropriate. I'd cover any expenses." No. Victoria stopped mid-sentence. No? If I do this, and I'm not saying I will, I'm not taking money from you. That would make me feel like an escort, and that's not what this is. Ethan's voice was firm, but not unkind. If I agree, it's because, I don't know, because I understand what it's like to not want to face something alone. Not because you're paying me. Something in Victoria's chest loosened slightly. Okay, no money. And I need to be home by 9. Emma goes to her grandmother's on weekends, but I don't like to be out too late. The reception should be over by 8:30. Ethan looked down at his daughter, then back at Victoria. Why did he leave you? The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Victoria almost stood up and walked away. But something in Ethan's expression stopped her. Not curiosity or judgment, but genuine interest, like he actually wanted to understand. He said, I was too cold, Victoria said finally. Too focused on work, not present enough, not warm enough. He said I cared more about quarterly reports than building a life together. Did you? Care more about work? No? Did you care about building a life with him? Victoria opened her mouth to give the automatic answer, the defensive answer, the answer that protected her pride. Then she closed it again. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I thought I did. But maybe he was right. Maybe I was so busy building my career that I forgot to build anything else. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma color. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he understood more than she'd said. I became a single father when Emma was 2, he said. Her mother, my ex-wife, decided that parenthood wasn't what she wanted. She left on a Tuesday morning while I was at work, and by the time I got home, half her clothes were gone, and there was a note on the kitchen counter. He paused, his jaw tightening slightly. The note said she loved Emma, but she wasn't built for this kind of life, that she needed to find herself, discover who she really was without the weight of motherhood holding her down. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and meant it. The thing is, for months afterward, I kept thinking I'd done something wrong, that if I'd been different, better, more exciting, maybe she would have stayed. It took me a long time to realize that sometimes people leave not because of who you are, but because of who they need to be. And those two things don't always match up. Victoria felt something shift inside her, a subtle realignment of perspective she hadn't expected. So you think Richard left because of who he needed to be, not because I was too cold? I think, Ethan said carefully, that too cold sounds like something someone says when they want to blame you for their own unhappiness. Maybe you were focused on work. Maybe you weren't as present as he wanted. But if he loved you, really loved you, he would have talked to you about it. He would have worked on it together. He wouldn't have just decided you were broken and left. The words hit Victoria harder than she'd expected. She'd spent 8 months accepting Richard's narrative, believing that she was fundamentally flawed, that her drive and focus made her unlovable. Hearing someone challenge that assumption felt like opening a window in a room that had been sealed shut. So will you do it? She asked, surprising herself with how much she wanted him to say yes. Ethan looked at Emma, then at Victoria, then at the sky as though asking for divine guidance. Finally he sighed, but it was the sigh of someone accepting a challenge, not one of defeat. I'll do it, on one condition. Name it. We do this honestly. I'm not going to pretend to be some corporate executive or wealthy businessman or anyone other than exactly who I am. I'm a single dad who teaches art at a community center and does carpentry on the side to make ends meet. If that's going to embarrass you at a fancy vineyard wedding, we should end this now. Victoria felt a laugh bubble up unexpectedly, the first genuine one she'd had in weeks. Honestly, that might be the most interesting thing about me at this wedding. Everyone else will be talking about portfolios and market shares and vacation homes. You'll actually have something real to say. Ethan's smile was slow but genuine. Okay then? I guess we're doing this. We're doing this, Victoria confirmed. And for the first time since seeing that wedding invitation, she felt something other than dread. It might have been hope, it might have been relief, or it might have been the first flutter of something she wasn't ready to name yet. Emma looked up from her coloring book, purple crayon still in hand. Daddy, who's this lady? Ethan glanced at Victoria with a question in his eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly. This is Victoria, sweetheart. She's a new friend. We're going to help her with something important. Is she nice? Emma asked with the blunt honesty of a child. Victoria leaned forward, meeting the little girl's eyes. I'm going to try to be. Your daddy seems to think I can be anyway. Emma considered this seriously, then returned to her coloring. Okay, do you like butterflies? Yes, I do like butterflies. Good. This one is for you. Emma carefully tore the page from her book and handed it to Victoria, the purple butterfly somewhat lopsided but colored with fierce concentration. Victoria accepted the drawing like it was a priceless artifact. Thank you, Emma. I'll keep this somewhere special. And she meant it. Over the next week, Victoria and Ethan met 3 more times to prepare for the wedding. They chose neutral locations, coffee shops, parks, once a quiet restaurant where they could talk without being overheard. Each meeting followed a similar pattern. Victoria would arrive early, perfectly put together, her notebook and phone ready. Ethan would arrive precisely on time, sometimes with Emma, sometimes without, always relaxed in a way that made Victoria acutely aware of her own tension. Their first official planning session took place at a park near Ethan's neighborhood. Victoria arrived in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, her attempt at casual, and found Ethan pushing Emma on the swings. Sorry, he called when he saw her. Emma's grandmother had a doctor's appointment, so she's with me today. Hope that's okay. It's fine, Victoria said, and realized she meant it. She sat on a bench near the swing set, pulling out her tablet. I thought we should establish some basics. Background information that would be consistent if anyone asked questions. Ethan lifted Emma from the swing and set her down near the slide. Go ahead, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you. He joined Victoria on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. Okay, so we need a story. How did we meet? Victoria had already prepared for this. I thought we could say we met at a charity event. Art auction, perhaps. That way it's plausible that our paths crossed despite our different professional circles. Except I've never been to an art auction in my life, and I'd probably give myself away in about 30 seconds if someone asked me about it. Then what do you suggest? Ethan thought for a moment, watching Emma climb the slide. What if we just tell them the truth? That we met at a cafe, your shoes got ruined by orange juice, and we started talking. It's memorable, it's real, and we won't have to remember a fake story. Victoria felt her control freak instincts rebel against this plan. The truth? That I hunted you down and asked you to be my fake date to my ex's wedding. No, the truth that we met by accident and kept running into each other. That we started getting coffee together, talking, and things developed naturally from there. Ethan turned to face her more directly. Look, the more complicated we make this, the more likely we are to screw it up. If we keep it simple, keep it close to reality, it'll be easier to remember and harder to contradict. Victoria considered this, her business mind recognizing the logic even as her instinct for control resisted. Fine. Simple truth. We met at a cafe, started talking, have been seeing each other casually for a few weeks. How long have we been dating? 3 weeks by the time of the wedding, recent enough that it's not serious, established enough that I wouldn't bring you to a wedding otherwise. What do I call you? Victoria? Vicky? Victoria. I don't do nicknames. Never? Never. Ethan smiled slightly. Okay, Victoria. What should I know about you? Real things, not the public biography. What do you do when you're not running a company? The question caught Victoria off guard. I work. Mostly. I go to the gym sometimes. I read industry publications. What do you do for fun? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it again. When had she last done something purely for enjoyment? I don't know. I used to go to museums, art galleries, but that was years ago. Why'd you stop? Because there's always another meeting, another report, another crisis that needs my attention. Fun feels like a luxury I can't afford. Ethan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. That sounds lonely. It was. Victoria had never admitted it out loud, but it was desperately, achingly lonely. What about you? What do you do for fun? I build things. Furniture, mostly. There's something satisfying about taking raw wood and turning it into something useful and beautiful. Emma and I go to the park every Sunday. We paint together. Her skill level is improving, mine is questionable. He pointed to the slide where Emma was now hanging upside down from a bar, her curls dangling toward the ground. I read to her every night before bed. Right now we're working through the Chronicles of Narnia. She's obsessed with Aslan. Victoria watched him talk about his daughter, saw the way his entire face softened, the pride and love evident in every word. You're a good father. I try. Some days are better than others. But she's the best thing that ever happened to me, so I figure if I keep showing up and loving her, I can't go too far wrong. Is it hard, being a single parent? Sometimes. Financially, it's tight. Emotionally, it's exhausting. There's no one to tag in when I'm at the end of my rope, no one to share the decisions or the worry. He paused, watching Emma jump from the bottom of the slide. But I wouldn't trade it. She's taught me more about being human than anything else ever could. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. Not pity, but recognition. I think I've spent so long trying to be perfect at my job that I forgot how to be human at all. Ethan turned to look at her, and his expression was so kind that Victoria had to look away. I don't think you forgot. I think you just convinced yourself that being human was the same thing as being weak. The observation was so accurate it felt like an arrow finding its mark. Victoria swallowed hard, her throat suddenly tight. Victoria, Ethan said quietly, what do you want from this wedding? Really? She could have given him the surface answer. She wanted to save face, to prove she'd moved on, to show Richard that leaving her hadn't destroyed her. But sitting on that park bench, watching Emma play, talking to this man who seemed to see through every defense she'd ever built, Victoria found herself saying something true. I want to stop feeling like a failure. Richard made me feel like I was fundamentally broken, like there was something wrong with me that made me unlovable. Going to his wedding alone would feel like confirming that, like admitting he was right. She took a shaky breath. I want to walk into that vineyard and feel like I deserve to be there. Like I deserve happiness, even if I haven't figured out what that looks like yet. Ethan didn't offer empty reassurances or tell her she was being ridiculous. He simply nodded slowly, as though he understood the weight of what she was carrying. Okay, he said. Then that's what we'll do. We'll walk in there together, and you'll hold your head high, and you'll remember that you're not broken. You're just someone who hasn't met the right person yet. How do you know I'll meet the right person? I don't, but I know that you deserve to, and sometimes that's enough to start with. Their second meeting happened at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. Ethan had suggested it, saying they should practice being comfortable together in a social setting. Victoria had agreed, then spent 2 hours trying to decide what to wear before settling on dark slacks and a silk blouse. Professional, but not stuffy. Ethan arrived in khakis and a button-down shirt, looking more put together than she'd seen him before. No Emma tonight, he explained as they were seated. She's with her grandmother, so we can actually have a full conversation without interruptions about whether unicorns are real. Are they? Victoria asked, surprising herself. According to Emma, absolutely. They just hide really well. The server took their orders. Victoria chose pasta primavera. Ethan ordered lasagna, and they settled into the kind of conversation that should have been awkward, but somehow wasn't. Tell me about your company, Ethan said. I looked you up online, but I want to hear it from you. Victoria had given this speech 1,000 times. The elevator pitch, the investor presentation, the press interview version. But something about the way Ethan asked, genuinely curious with no agenda behind it, made her want to give him something real. I started Hale Innovations 8 years ago with a business partner who left after the first year. Everyone told me I'd fail. I was too young, too inexperienced, trying to break into a market dominated by established players. The first 2 years, I almost proved them right. I maxed out my credit cards, slept in my office more nights than I slept at home, lived on coffee and takeout. What changed? I landed a contract with a major retailer that needed a complete logistics overhaul. It was a massive project, too big for a small company really, but I knew if we could pull it off, it would establish us as serious players. So I mortgaged everything I had, hired the best people I could afford, and we worked ourselves half to death for 6 months. Did it work? Victoria smiled, remembering. We delivered 3 weeks early and 15% under budget. The client was so impressed they recommended us to 3 other companies. Within a year, we'd tripled our revenue. Within 3, we'd gone public. That's incredible. It nearly killed me, Victoria said honestly. I was so focused on proving everyone wrong, on building something that couldn't be dismissed or diminished, that I lost track of everything else. My friends drifted away because I never had time for them. My family stopped inviting me to holidays because I always chose work. And Richard, she trailed off, the familiar ache settling in her chest. What about Richard? Richard was patient. For a long time he was patient. He understood that I was building something, that it required sacrifice. But eventually, his patience ran out. He wanted someone who could be present, who could turn off the CEO brain and just be. And I didn't know how to do that. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. Can I ask you something? Yes. Do you regret it? Building your company, making those sacrifices? Victoria considered the question carefully. I regret losing Richard. Or rather, I regret not recognizing that I was losing him until it was too late. But the company itself? No. I'm proud of what I built, proud of the jobs I created, the problems we've solved. I just wish I'd figured out how to have both. Maybe you still can. Maybe. But it seems like the world wants you to choose. Be successful or be happy. Be driven or be warm. Be professional or be human. That's a false choice, Ethan said firmly. You can be all of those things. You just have to find someone who understands that driven and cold aren't the same thing, that passion for your work doesn't mean you can't have passion for other things too. Did you ever feel that way, like you had to choose? Every day, Ethan admitted. I chose Emma. When her mother left, I had opportunities, job offers that would have tripled my salary, career advancement that could have set me up financially for life. But they all required travel, long hours, the kind of commitment that wouldn't leave room for being a present father. So I chose the community center job, the carpentry side work, the life that lets me pick Emma up from school and read to her at bedtime. He paused, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if I'd chosen differently. But then Emma does something, learns a new word, creates a painting, tells me I'm her best friend, and I know I chose right. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did, even with people she'd known for years. There was something about Ethan's steady presence that made her feel like she didn't have to perform, didn't have to be the polished CEO or the perfect ex-girlfriend or anything other than herself. What should I know about the wedding? Ethan asked eventually. Who's going to be there? Victoria pulled out her phone, calling up the mental file she'd been building. Richard's family, old money, East Coast establishment, very focused on appearances. His parents never liked me. They thought I was too ambitious, too common. Richard's father once told me I had an unfortunate amount of backbone for someone from my background. Charming. Melissa's family is more modern, self-made wealth, wellness industry people. They'll probably ask you about your meditation practice and whether you've tried their new adaptogenic supplement line. Ethan laughed. I'll tell them the only adaptogens I know are coffee and occasionally wine. There will also be Richard's college friends, investment bankers, corporate lawyers, the kind of men who own boats and talk about their handicaps. And Melissa's influencer crowd, very pretty, very enthusiastic, very interested in whether you're following them on social media. This sounds terrifying. It will be, Victoria said honestly. They're going to judge you, try to figure out who you are and whether I've upgraded from Richard. Some of them will be genuinely nice, but most will be performing, trying to get information they can turn into gossip later. So how do we handle it? We stay close. We keep our stories straight. And most importantly, we act like we're comfortable with each other, like we've been together long enough that we don't need to try too hard. Ethan reached across the table, and for a moment Victoria thought he was going to take her hand. Instead, he adjusted her water glass so it was within easier reach. Such a small gesture, but so naturally considerate that it caught her off guard. We can do this, he said quietly. You're going to walk in there with your head high. I'm going to be exactly who I am without apology, and anyone who has a problem with either of those things can spend their evening being miserable about it. Victoria felt something warm unfurl in her chest. You really don't care what they think of you, do you? I used to. Before Emma, I cared a lot about being impressive, about proving I was worth people's time and attention. But then I became a father, and I realized that the only opinion that really matters is hers. Everyone else? They can think what they want. I know who I am. I wish I had that kind of confidence. You do, Ethan said. You just apply it to your work instead of your personal life. The woman who mortgaged everything to land that first big contract, she didn't care what people thought. She knew what she was capable of, and she went for it. That's the woman I want to see at this wedding. Victoria stared at him, this man who'd known her for barely a week, but somehow saw her more clearly than people who'd been in her life for years. Why are you really doing this? She asked. And don't say it's just because you understand not wanting to face something alone. There has to be more to it than that. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on his plate. When he looked up, his expression was open, vulnerable in a way that made Victoria's breath catch. Because when I look at you, I see someone who's forgotten that being strong and being alone aren't the same thing. Same. And I spent too many years after my ex-wife left believing they were. I don't want that for you. Even if this is just for one night, even if we go back to being strangers afterward, I want you to remember what it feels like to have someone in your corner who's there because they want to be, not because they want something from you. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. That's possibly the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. Then you've been spending time with the wrong people. They finished their dinner with easier conversation. Ethan told her about Emma's school play. Victoria shared stories about her early days as an entrepreneur. By the time they left the restaurant, Victoria felt lighter than she had in months. In the parking lot, they paused beside Victoria's car. Same time next week? Ethan asked. Maybe we should practice the physical stuff. How we stand together, whether we hold hands, that kind of thing. So it doesn't look awkward at the wedding. Victoria nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at the thought of holding Ethan's hand. That makes sense. We should look natural together. Right. Natural. Ethan smiled, and in the parking lot lights, his eyes looked warm and genuine. Good night, Victoria. Good night, Ethan. She drove home with the window down, letting the cool air clear her head, wondering what she'd gotten herself into and why it didn't feel nearly as terrifying as it should. Their third meeting happened at a botanical garden on a Saturday afternoon. Emma was with them again, racing ahead on the paths, stopping to examine every flower and butterfly she encountered. Sorry, Ethan said for the third time. I know this wasn't what you had in mind for our practice session. It's fine, Victoria said, and she meant it. There was something peaceful about walking through the gardens, watching Emma's unfiltered joy at every discovery. Besides, this is more realistic, isn't it? If we're supposedly dating, I should be comfortable around your daughter. Are you? Comfortable, I mean? Victoria thought about it. Surprisingly, yes. I'm not usually good with children. They're so unpredictable. That's what makes them great, Ethan said, smiling as Emma tried to climb into a fountain to get a closer look at the koi fish. Emma, out of the fountain, please. We've talked about this. Emma reluctantly stepped back onto solid ground. But the fish wanted to meet me. I'm sure they did, sweetheart, but they live in the water and you live on land, so we have to respect their space. Victoria watched this exchange with fascination. You're very patient with her. I try. Parenting books say consistency and patience are key. Real life says I make it up as I go and hope for the best. He glanced at Victoria. Do you want kids someday? The question surprised her. I don't know. I always thought I did, but then work became everything, and the timeline just kept shifting. Richard wanted children. That was one of his issues with me. He said I'd never make time for a family, even if we had one. Do you think he was right? Victoria considered this carefully, watching Emma twirl on the path ahead of them. I think I would have tried, but I don't know if trying would have been enough. Being a parent seems like it requires a level of presence I'm not sure I'm capable of. It does, Ethan said honestly. But you'd be surprised what you're capable of when it matters. Before Emma, I thought I was too selfish for parenthood, too focused on my own goals and freedom. Then her mother left, and suddenly I was responsible for this tiny human who needed me for literally everything, and I figured it out. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but I figured it out. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and exhausting, and sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if I'm screwing her up in ways I won't understand until she's in therapy 30 years from now. But it's also the most real thing I've ever done. Everything else, my work, my hobbies, my relationships, they all feel like rehearsals compared to being her father. They walked in silence for a while, Emma now collecting fallen flower petals in her hands. Victoria found herself thinking about her own parents, about how they'd supported her ambitions while also making it clear they worried about her happiness. Her mother had said something similar to what Richard had, that Victoria was building an empire but forgetting to build a life. "Can I ask you something personal?" Victoria said finally. "You're asking me to be your fake boyfriend. I think we're past the boundary of personal questions." Victoria smiled despite herself. "Do you ever want to date again? Find someone who could be a partner, maybe a mother figure for Emma?" Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. "Someday, maybe, but it's complicated. Anyone I date has to understand that Emma comes first, always. And a lot of people say they're okay with that, but when it comes down to it, they want someone who can be spontaneous, who doesn't have to arrange childcare or be home by 8:30 or plan everything around a school schedule. That sounds lonely. It is sometimes, but I'd rather be alone than be with someone who makes Emma feel like she's an obstacle to overcome." They reached a quiet corner of the garden where a bench sat beneath a flowering tree. Emma immediately began making piles of the fallen petals, creating elaborate patterns only she understood. Ethan gestured to the bench. "Should we practice?" "Practice what?" "The physical proximity thing, how we're going to act together at the wedding." Victoria's heart rate picked up slightly, but she nodded and sat down. Ethan settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Too far apart," Victoria said clinically. "If we're dating, we'd be more comfortable with closeness." Ethan shifted closer, and suddenly their shoulders were touching. Victoria could feel the warmth of him through her light jacket, could smell something clean and woodsy that might have been his soap or shampoo. "Better?" he asked, and his voice was slightly rougher than usual. "Better," Victoria confirmed, trying to ignore how aware she was of every point of contact between them. "We should probably hold hands? At least part of the time?" Ethan held out his hand palm up on the bench between them. Victoria looked at it for a moment, calloused from carpentry work, paint still faintly staining one fingernail, strong and capable and real. Then she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, and Victoria felt something shift in her chest. This was supposed to be practice, supposed to be clinical and businesslike. But sitting on that bench with her hand in his, watching his daughter play, Victoria felt something that had nothing to do with business at all. "This okay?" Ethan asked quietly. "Yes," Victoria whispered. "This is okay." They sat like that for several minutes, not talking, just being together while Emma sang to herself and rearranged her petal patterns. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd simply sat with someone without feeling the need to fill the silence with conversation, or check her phone, or plan the next thing on her agenda. "Victoria," Ethan said eventually, still holding her hand, "I want you to know something. When we walk into that wedding, I'm not going to be thinking about Richard or his new wife or any of those people. I'm going to be thinking about making sure you feel supported, making sure you remember that you're worth more than whatever judgment they're passing." Victoria turned to look at him and found him already watching her with those steady brown eyes that seemed to see everything she tried to hide. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why does this matter to you?" "Because I know what it's like to have someone make you believe you're not enough, and I know how hard it is to unlearn that. If I can help you unlearn it, even a little bit, then this matters." Victoria felt tears threaten again and blinked them back. She was a CEO, for God's sake. She didn't cry on park benches with men she barely knew. Except she did know Ethan, she realized. Maybe not the surface details, his middle name or his favorite color or what he'd studied in college, but the important things. She knew he was kind, patient, honest. She knew he showed up for the people he cared about. She knew he didn't perform or pretend or polish himself into someone he wasn't. She knew that sitting beside him felt safer than she'd felt in years. "Thank you," she said finally, "for doing this, for understanding, for being you." Ethan smiled, that slow, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "You're welcome. Though I should probably thank you too." "For what?" "For reminding me that taking a risk on someone, even for something as strange as a fake wedding date, can lead to something real. Maybe not romance, maybe just friendship, but something worth having." Emma chose that moment to run back to them, her hands full of petals and her face glowing with joy. "Daddy, Victoria, look what I made." So they both looked at the elaborate pattern she'd created on the ground, a heart made entirely of pink and white flower petals. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Ethan said. Emma beamed at him, then turned to Victoria with sudden seriousness. "Are you my daddy's girlfriend?" Victoria froze, unsure how to answer. But Ethan simply pulled Emma onto his lap and said gently, "Victoria and I are friends, Em. Good friends. Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this with the gravity of a judge, then she nodded. "Okay. Can she come to Sunday park days?" Ethan looked at Victoria with a question in his eyes. And Victoria, who never made commitments she couldn't keep, who scheduled every moment of her life weeks in advance, who protected her time more fiercely than anything else, heard herself say, "I'd like that very much." The smile Emma gave her was worth more than any quarterly report or successful contract negotiation. And the way Ethan squeezed her hand, still intertwined with his, felt like the beginning of something she hadn't known she was looking for. The wedding was still 2 weeks away, but sitting on that bench in the botanical garden, Victoria realized that what happened at the vineyard was starting to matter less than what was happening right here, right now. She was learning how to be human again, and somehow, improbably, she had Ethan Miller and his orange juice spilling daughter to thank for it. The following Sunday, Victoria found herself doing something she hadn't done in over a decade. She cleared her schedule for an entire afternoon with no agenda, no meetings, no work emergencies demanding her attention. She stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, staring at rows of tailored suits and designer dresses, before finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Ethan had texted her the address of their usual park, adding that Emma was very excited about Park Day with Victoria. The message had made her smile in a way that felt unfamiliar, like muscles she'd forgotten how to use. She arrived 10 minutes early and spotted them immediately. Ethan was pushing Emma on the swings, both of them laughing about something. The sound carried across the playground, genuine and unguarded, and Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. This was what happiness looked like, she realized. Not quarterly earnings or successful product launches or glowing press coverage. This. Just this. "Victoria!" Emma's shriek of delight drew the attention of half the parents in the park. She launched herself from the swing mid-arc, and Victoria's heart stopped until Ethan caught her smoothly, clearly used to his daughter's physics-defying exits. "We talked about waiting for the swing to stop," Ethan said, but his tone was more amused than stern. "But Victoria's here." Emma wriggled free and ran to Victoria, grabbing her hand with sticky fingers. "Come see the duck pond. There's babies and they're so tiny and cute, and one of them is my favorite, and I named him Gerald." "You named a duck Gerald?" Victoria asked, allowing herself to be pulled along the path. "All the good names were taken," Emma said seriously. "There's already a sparkle and a rainbow and a princess. Gerald was the only one left." Ethan fell into step beside them, his shoulder brushing Victoria's. "Fair warning, we're going to spend at least 45 minutes at this duck pond. It's her current obsession." "I have nowhere else to be," Victoria said, and meant it. They settled on a bench overlooking the pond, Emma immediately launching into detailed descriptions of each duckling's personality and habits. Victoria found herself genuinely engaged, asking questions about Gerald's relationship with his siblings and whether he was a good swimmer. "You're really good with her," Ethan said quietly, while Emma was distracted by Gerald's apparent swimming prowess. "I'm just listening." "That's more than most people do. They hear duck pond, and their eyes glaze over. You're actually interested." Victoria watched Emma's animated face, her hands gesturing wildly as she narrated Gerald's adventures. She's interesting. She sees magic in things most adults have trained themselves to ignore. That's exactly it, Ethan said, his voice warm with understanding. I try to preserve that in her, that ability to find wonder in ordinary things. The world's going to try to make her cynical soon enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ducklings paddle around their mother. Victoria felt her phone buzz in her pocket, probably work, probably important, and deliberately ignored it. Whatever crisis was unfolding could wait. This moment, this strange new experience of simply being present, felt too precious to interrupt. Can I ask you something? Ethan said eventually. Always. What are you most nervous about? For the wedding, I mean, specifically. Victoria considered the question carefully. There's a moment at every wedding, right after the ceremony, when people are milling around congratulating the couple. Richard's mother will find me. She always does. And she'll look me over with that smile that isn't really a smile, and she'll say something that sounds like a compliment but is actually designed to make me feel small. Like what? Last time I saw her at a charity gala, she said, "Victoria, darling, you look wonderful, so successful. I suppose that's what matters most to you." Victoria mimicked the woman's tone perfectly, clipped and dismissive. It was her way of saying I'd chosen career over family, ambition over love, and therefore failed at the only things that really matter for a woman. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's cruel. That's Catherine Ashford. She perfected the art of the backhanded compliment decades ago. Victoria pulled her jacket tighter, though she wasn't actually cold. The worst part is, she's not entirely wrong. I did choose my career. I did prioritize success over relationships. And now I'm 34, single, and pretending to have a boyfriend just to avoid looking pathetic at my ex's wedding. Hey, Ethan's voice was firm enough that Victoria looked at him. You're not pathetic. You're someone who built something remarkable. You created jobs, solved problems, made a real impact. The fact that you haven't also found the right partner yet doesn't diminish any of that. Try telling Catherine Ashford that. I will, if I need to. Ethan wasn't smiling. If she says something that crosses a line, I'm not going to stand there quietly and let her tear you down. Victoria felt something warm bloom in her chest. You'd really defend me to Richard's mother? I'd defend you to anyone. That's what this is about, right? Making sure you don't have to face them alone? Before Victoria could respond, Emma came racing back, breathless with excitement. Gerald did a whole flip underwater, did you see? I must have missed it, Victoria said solemnly. Will he do it again? I'll ask him. Emma turned back to the pond and began an earnest, one-sided conversation with Gerald about the importance of performing for guests. Ethan laughed quietly. She gets her confidence from her mother. Sarah could walk into any room and immediately own it. That's the one thing I'm grateful she gave Emma, the belief that she belongs wherever she goes. It was the first time Ethan had mentioned his ex-wife by name. Victoria glanced at him, reading the complicated emotions that flickered across his face. Do you still miss her? She asked gently. I miss who I thought she was. The woman I fell in love with. The woman who said she wanted to build a life with me. But that woman either never existed or changed into someone I didn't recognize. He paused, watching Emma. I don't miss the person who left that note on the counter. I don't miss the woman who chose herself over her daughter. But I miss the idea of partnership, of having someone to share things with. I understand that. I miss the idea of Richard more than I miss Richard himself. I miss having someone to come home to, someone who knew my coffee order and which side of the bed I preferred. The relationship was probably dead long before he left, but I didn't want to admit it. They both watched Emma, who was now attempting to teach Gerald a synchronized swimming routine. Do you think we're both just lonely? Victoria asked. Is that why we're doing this? Two lonely people trying to convince ourselves we're not? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Maybe. Or maybe we're two people who are tired of being lonely and finally doing something about it, even if it's unconventional. Fake dating is definitely unconventional. Is it fake, though? Ethan turned to face her more fully. We're spending time together, getting to know each other, enjoying each other's company. The only fake part is that we're calling it dating when really we're just being friends who might become something more. Victoria's heart stuttered. Might become something more? Ethan's expression was open, vulnerable. I know that's not the agreement. I know you asked me to do this because I'm supposed to disappear after the wedding. But Victoria, I like you. I like talking to you, spending time with you. Emma adores you, which is not something that happens often, and I keep thinking that maybe, after all this is over, we don't have to go back to being strangers. Victoria couldn't breathe. This wasn't the plan. The plan was simple, clean, temporary. Ethan was supposed to be her safe choice precisely because he wouldn't want anything more than this one evening of pretending. I don't know if I can do a relationship, she said quietly. I don't know if I'm capable of being what someone needs. Richard was right about that. I'm too focused, too driven, too brave, Ethan interrupted, too intelligent, too accomplished, because those are the words I'd use. Richard was intimidated by your success and blamed you for his own insecurity. That doesn't make you broken, Victoria. That makes him small. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know that you took time off work to spend an afternoon at a duck pond with a man and his 6-year-old daughter. I know that you listened to Emma talk about ducklings for 45 minutes without checking your phone once. I know that you're scared of Catherine Ashford's opinion, but you're going to that wedding anyway because you refuse to hide. Ethan's voice softened. I know enough, and I'd like to know more, if you'll let me. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Words felt inadequate, too small to contain the complicated tangle of fear and hope and longing churning inside her. Emma saved her from having to answer by running back, this time with a handful of wildflowers she'd apparently picked from the border of the path. These are for you, she announced, pressing them into Victoria's hands. Because you're nice, and you smell pretty, and you make Daddy smile more. Victoria looked down at the slightly wilted flowers, their stems bent and leaves crushed from Emma's enthusiastic grip. They were perfect. Thank you, Emma. These are beautiful. You have to put them in water when you get home or they'll die, Emma said with the authority of someone who'd learned this lesson through experience. And you have to tell them they're pretty every day so they know you love them. I'll do that, Victoria promised. Ethan stood, brushing off his jeans. We should probably head out. It's almost dinner time and someone needs a bath. He looked pointedly at Emma, whose clothes were covered in grass stains and what might have been duck pond water. I'm not dirty, Emma protested. You have a leaf in your hair, sweetheart. It's decorative. Victoria found herself laughing, the sound surprising her with its genuine warmth. When was the last time she'd laughed like this, free and unguarded? They walked back to the parking lot together, Emma between them, holding both their hands and swinging her arms dramatically. She chattered about Gerald and her swimming lessons and her friend Marcus from school who could burp the alphabet. At Victoria's car, there was an awkward moment where they all stood looking at each other, no one quite sure how to say goodbye. Same time next week? Emma asked hopefully. Victoria looked at Ethan, finding him watching her with an expression that made her stomach flip. Same time next week, she confirmed. Emma threw herself at Victoria's legs in an enthusiastic hug that nearly knocked her over. Yay! Maybe Gerald will have learned new tricks by then. After Emma bounded toward Ethan's car, Ethan lingered for a moment. Think about what I said. About after the wedding. You don't have to answer now, just think about it. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. She drove home with the windows down despite the cool evening air, the wilted wildflowers on her passenger seat, and for the first time in 8 months, allowed herself to imagine a future that included more than just work. The next week passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls, but Victoria found her mind wandering during presentations, thinking about Ethan's words. Could she really do this? Could she let someone in again, risk the vulnerability and potential heartbreak that came with actually caring about someone? Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan on Wednesday evening. She was still at the office, reviewing contracts, when his name lit up her screen. Emma drew you a picture. She's very proud of it. Can I send it? Victoria typed back immediately. Please do. A moment later, an image appeared. It was a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures standing under what might have been a tree or possibly a very large broccoli. The tallest figure had brown scribbles for hair, presumably Ethan. The smallest had wild curls and a massive smile. Emma. And the third, Victoria realized with something warm blooming in her chest, wore what looked like a business suit and held flowers. She labeled them, Ethan's next text read. Daddy, me, and Victoria, our friend. Victoria stared at that drawing for longer than was probably reasonable, something shifting in her carefully constructed defenses. Emma had drawn her into their family portrait, had labeled her our friend like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Tell her it's beautiful. I'll put it on my refrigerator," she typed. "Really? You have things on your refrigerator?" "I will now." There was a pause, then, "She wants to know if you can come to her school art show Friday evening. No pressure. I know you're busy, but she's been working on a special project and apparently you're on the VIP list." Victoria pulled up her calendar. Friday evening, she had a dinner with potential investors, a meeting she'd been planning for weeks. It was important, critical even. She looked at the drawing again, at the stick figure version of herself holding wildflowers. "What time?" she typed. 6:30 at Jefferson Elementary." Victoria pulled up her assistant's contact. "I'll be there." Friday evening found Victoria sitting in a too-small chair in an elementary school cafeteria that smelled like disinfectant and poster paint. Around her, parents chatted and compared notes on their children's artistic development. She felt wildly out of place in her work clothes, having come straight from the office after rescheduling the investor dinner. Ethan spotted her from across the room and navigated through the crowd, Emma bouncing at his side. "You came!" Emma shrieked, launching herself at Victoria with the force of a small missile. "I said I would," Victoria said, steadying herself. "Did you bring the flowers?" Emma asked seriously. Victoria pulled the now dried wildflowers from her purse, carefully preserved in a small vase she'd purchased specifically for this purpose. "I kept them, just like you told me, and I told them they were pretty every day." Emma's smile could have powered a small city. "I knew you would. Come see my project." She dragged Victoria through the cafeteria to a display board covered in paintings, drawings, and what appeared to be sculptures made from recycled materials. In the center was Emma's special project, a painting of 3 figures in a park surrounded by ducks. The brushstrokes were enthusiastic, if not precisely accurate, and the ducks were various improbable colors, but the joy in the piece was unmistakable. "That's us," Emma explained unnecessarily, "at Park Day. See? There's Gerald. He's the purple one because purple is special." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "Emma, this is incredible. You're a real artist." "Daddy says I get it from him, but I think I'm better because I use more colors." Ethan appeared at Victoria's elbow, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "She's not wrong. I tend toward boring landscapes. She goes for maximum rainbow impact." They moved through the exhibit together, Emma providing detailed explanations for each piece of art, Ethan adding quiet commentary that made Victoria smile. Other parents watched them with curiosity, this trio that looked like a family but somehow wasn't, quite. One woman approached, smiling brightly. "Your daughter is so talented. You must be very proud." There was a beat of silence. Victoria opened her mouth to correct the assumption, but Ethan spoke first. "We are. Emma's got a real gift for seeing the world in her own unique way." The woman beamed and moved on. Victoria looked at Ethan, questions in her eyes. "Easier than explaining," he said quietly, and not entirely inaccurate. "I am proud of her, and you were standing right there admiring her work, so technically, we works." "Technically," Victoria echoed, something warm settling in her chest. After the art show, they went for ice cream. Emma's demand, not a request. They sat outside despite the cooling evening air, Emma working her way through a cone that was more sprinkles than actual ice cream. "So," Ethan said, his own cone untouched. "The wedding is tomorrow." Victoria's stomach clenched. She'd been so focused on these afternoons with Ethan and Emma that she'd almost forgotten the original purpose of all this. "Tomorrow," she confirmed. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified. Nauseous, like I might fake a sudden illness and not go at all." "But you're going." "I'm going." Emma looked up from her ice cream, her face serious despite the chocolate smeared across her cheeks. "Are you scared of something?" Victoria considered how to explain this to a 6-year-old. "I have to go to a party tomorrow with people who might not be very nice to me, and I'm nervous about it." "Will Daddy be with you?" "Yes." "Then you don't have to be scared. Daddy's really good at making scared things not scary anymore. He does it for me all the time." Ethan's expression softened. "That's my job, sweetheart. Making sure the people I care about feel safe." So Victoria will be safe tomorrow because you care about her? Emma asked with the relentless logic of childhood. Ethan met Victoria's eyes across the small table. Yes, Victoria will be safe because I care about her. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that had nothing to do with their original agreement. I care about you too, Victoria said quietly, surprised by how true it was. Both of you. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to her ice cream, but Ethan continued watching Victoria with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. After tomorrow, he said. After the wedding, can we talk? Really talk about what happens next? Victoria wanted to say no, to protect herself, to keep this contained and controlled and temporary. But sitting there with chocolate ice cream melting in her hand and Emma humming between them, and Ethan looking at her like she mattered, she couldn't find the words for no. Yes, we can talk. That night, Victoria stood in front of her closet again, this time staring at the dress she'd chosen for the wedding. It was elegant, expensive, sophisticated, everything Catherine Ashford would expect. But looking at it now, Victoria wondered if she was choosing armor instead of clothing. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. Emma wanted me to tell you that you're going to be the prettiest person at the wedding tomorrow. Her words, not mine. Though for the record, I agree. Victoria smiled despite her nerves. Tell her thank you. And tell her I'm going to think about her painting tomorrow when I need to be brave. She says that's good because she painted extra bravery into it. Apparently the purple duck contains courage. Gerald is multi-talented. He really is. There was a pause, then another message. Victoria, I know you're nervous, but I want you to remember something. You're not walking in there to prove anything to Richard or his mother or anyone else. You're walking in there because you deserve to celebrate moving forward. And I'm going to be right beside you, reminding you of that as many times as you need to hear it. Victoria sat on her bed, the dress forgotten, and typed back, How did I get so lucky to find you in a coffee shop? Emma's coordination problems are a gift to us all. She laughed, the sound surprising her. Tell her the orange juice incident was the best accident that ever happened to me. I'll tell her. Now go get some sleep. You've got a wedding to attend tomorrow, and you're going to be magnificent. Victoria set her phone down and looked at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in 8 months, the woman looking back at her didn't seem quite so alone. The next morning arrived too quickly. Victoria went through her routine with mechanical precision. Shower, hair, makeup, dress. Each step felt like putting on pieces of armor, preparing for battle. By the time she was finished, she looked perfect, polished, untouchable. She stared at herself in the mirror and realized she looked exactly like the woman Richard had called cold. Her phone buzzed. I'm outside whenever you're ready. No rush. Victoria grabbed her purse and the small clutch that matched her dress, took one more look at her reflection, and walked out to meet whatever this day would bring. Ethan was leaning against his car when she emerged, and the look on his face when he saw her made Victoria's breath catch. He wasn't wearing his usual casual clothes. Instead, he dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly, his hair actually styled instead of falling into his eyes. He looked sophisticated, handsome, completely comfortable in formal wear. He also looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. You're staring, Victoria said, trying to sound composed. You're stunning, Ethan replied. I mean, you're always attractive, but right now I don't have adequate words. You look very good yourself. I wasn't sure you even owned a suit. I own one suit. This is the suit. I wore it to my college graduation and Emma's baptism, and now I'm wearing it to pretend to be your boyfriend at your ex's wedding. He smiled. It's had an interesting life. He opened the car door for her, and Victoria slid into the passenger seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. In less than an hour, she'd be walking into Clearwater Vineyard, facing Richard and Melissa and Catherine Ashford, and everyone who'd watched her relationship implode 8 months ago. Ethan got into the driver's seat and immediately reached for her hand. Breathe, he said gently. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You've got this. What if I don't? Then we leave. The moment you want to go, we go. You don't owe anyone your discomfort, Victoria. Not Richard, not his mother, not anyone. Victoria squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the solid warmth of him. Okay, I can do this. You absolutely can, and I'll be right there with you. The drive to Clearwater Vineyard took 45 minutes, winding through rolling hills and past rows of grapevines heavy with late-season fruit. It was beautiful in that deliberately curated way that screamed expensive, the kind of place that knew exactly how picturesque it was and charged accordingly. Ethan pulled into the parking area, which was already filling with luxury cars that probably cost more than he made in a year. He didn't seem intimidated, just found a spot and turned off the engine. "Ready?" he asked. Victoria looked at the elegant buildings in the distance, the pristine gardens, the guests already mingling on the terrace in their designer clothes and practiced smiles. Everything in her wanted to say no, to ask him to drive away, to pretend this day didn't exist. Instead, she thought about Emma's painting, about the purple duck that contained courage, about the stick figure version of herself holding wildflowers. "I'm ready." They walked toward the venue together, Ethan's hand warm and steady around hers. With each step, Victoria felt her defenses rising, her CEO mask sliding into place. But then Ethan would squeeze her hand or lean in to murmur something encouraging, and she'd remember she wasn't alone in this. The ceremony area was set up in a garden overlooking the vineyard, white chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arch covered in roses at the front. Guests were already being seated, and Victoria spotted familiar faces immediately. Richard's college roommate, Melissa's sister, a handful of mutual friends who'd awkwardly chosen sides after the breakup. And there, standing near the entrance like a queen surveying her kingdom, was Catherine Ashford. She spotted Victoria immediately, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly before her expression smoothed into practiced pleasantness. She began making her way toward them, and Victoria felt every muscle in her body tense. "That's her?" Ethan asked quietly. "That's her." "She looks exactly like I imagined. Like someone who'd critique flower arrangements while Rome burns." Victoria choked on a surprised laugh, and Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly at the sound. "Victoria," Catherine said, reaching them. Her voice was cultured, warm in that way that never reached her eyes. "How unexpected to see you here. I wasn't sure you'd come." "Catherine, you look well." Victoria's voice was steady, professional. "This is Ethan Miller. Ethan, this is Catherine Ashford, Richard's mother." Ethan extended his hand with easy confidence. "Mrs. Ashford, beautiful venue you've chosen. Your son has excellent taste." Catherine's smile was sharp as glass. "How kind of you to say. And what is it you do, Mr. Miller?" Here it was, the test. The moment where Catherine would assess Ethan's worth based on his profession and salary and social standing. "I teach art at a community center," Ethan said without hesitation, "and I do carpentry work on the side. I build furniture mostly, custom pieces." Catherine's expression flickered, surprise, dismissal, poorly concealed disdain. "How quaint. I'm sure that keeps you busy." "It does, but I always make time for what matters, like being here with Victoria today." The emphasis on Victoria's name was subtle but deliberate, a reminder that he was here for her, not for the spectacle or the networking or the social climbing. Catherine's smile tightened. "Yes, well, how nice that Victoria has found someone to accompany her. I do hope you'll both enjoy the ceremony. If you'll excuse me, I should check on the seating arrangements." She swept away, and Victoria let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "That was brutal," she said quietly. "That was her trying to make you feel small. Did it work?" Victoria thought about it. A year ago, even 6 months ago, Catherine's dismissal would have cut deep. But standing here with Ethan, who'd met Catherine's snobbery with calm honesty, she felt something different. Not shame, not inadequacy, anger. "No?" she said, surprised by the conviction in her voice. "It didn't work." Ethan smiled. "Good. Now let's find our seats and get through this ceremony. The sooner it's over, the sooner we can get to the reception, and I can prove that a community center art teacher can absolutely hold his own at a fancy wedding." They found their seats, notably toward the back, Victoria noticed, probably Catherine's subtle message about her diminished importance. But she didn't care. Ethan sat beside her, solid and real, occasionally leaning in to make quiet observations that made her want to laugh at wholly inappropriate moments. When the music started and the wedding party began their procession, Victoria braced herself. She'd wondered how she'd feel seeing Richard again, seeing him pledge his life to someone else. Would it hurt? Would she regret losing him? Richard appeared at the end of the aisle, looking exactly as she remembered. Handsome, polished, confident in that easy way of someone who'd never had to fight for anything. He stood at the altar, beaming, playing the role of joyful groom with practiced charm. Then Melissa appeared, and Victoria felt nothing. No jealousy, no regret, just a distant acknowledgement that this was a beautiful woman in a beautiful dress marrying a man Victoria used to know. "You okay?" Ethan whispered. Victoria turned to look at him, this man who'd spent weeks helping her prepare for this moment, who'd rearranged his life to stand beside her, who looked at her like she mattered more than appearances or expectations or anyone else's opinion. "I'm better than okay," she whispered back. "I'm free." Ethan's hand found hers during the vows, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Victoria focused on that small gesture rather than the words being spoken at the altar. Richard's voice carried across the garden, earnest and clear as he promised forever to someone else, and she realized with startling clarity that she didn't want those promises anymore. She didn't want the version of forever that Richard offered, the one that required her to diminish herself to fit into someone else's vision of what she should be. The ceremony concluded with applause and the traditional kiss, and then guests began moving toward the reception area. Victoria stood, smoothing her dress, preparing herself for the gauntlet of cocktail hour. "You're doing great," Ethan said, his hand settling at the small of her back as they joined the flow of people moving through the vineyard gardens. "Really great. I haven't had to actually talk to anyone yet." "Fair point. Want to practice on me? Pretend I'm someone from Richard's world and ask me invasive questions about my net worth and investment portfolio." Victoria laughed despite herself. "That's terrifyingly accurate." They reached the reception terrace where servers circulated with champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres that looked too artistic to eat. Victoria accepted a glass more for something to hold than any desire to drink. Ethan did the same, then leaned in close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and understated. 2 o'clock, heading this way fast. Couple in their 40s, the woman keeps looking at you like she's solving a puzzle. Victoria glanced over and suppressed a groan. Marcus and Jennifer Chen. They were at business school with Richard. Jennifer runs a boutique PR firm. And they're definitely coming over here. Brace yourself. Jennifer reached them first, her smile bright and calculating. "Victoria! My goodness, we weren't sure you'd actually come. How brave of you." The word brave carried just enough emphasis to suggest the opposite. "And who is this?" "Jennifer, Marcus, this is Ethan Miller." Ethan, Jennifer, and Marcus Chen. Ethan shook their hands with easy confidence. "Nice to meet you both. Beautiful wedding." "It really is, isn't it?" Jennifer's eyes were already cataloging Ethan's suit, his shoes, looking for the designer labels that would place him in her social hierarchy. "So how do you and Victoria know each other?" "We met at a cafe a few weeks ago," Ethan said smoothly. "Her shoes got destroyed by orange juice, and I felt obligated to make sure she survived the trauma." Marcus laughed, surprised. "That's actually a great story. Better than the usual, we matched on an app thing everyone says now." "The orange juice was courtesy of my daughter," Ethan continued. "She's 6 and has what we're generously calling developing coordination." Victoria watched Jennifer's expression shift, recalculating. A single father. That explained the lack of designer labels, the unfamiliar face in their social circle. "How sweet," Jennifer said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And what do you do, Ethan?" "I teach art at a community center and build furniture on the side. Custom woodworking mostly. I just finished a dining table for a client in Pacific Heights, actually. Cherry wood with inlaid maple accents." "How creative," Jennifer said. "That must be fulfilling work." The dismissal in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Victoria felt anger flash through her, hot and protective. "It is," she said, her voice carrying the same steel she used in boardrooms. "Ethan's work is remarkable. He has a wait list 6 months long because people recognize quality craftsmanship when they see it. Not everyone can create something beautiful with their hands." Ethan's fingers tightened slightly on her waist, a silent acknowledgement of her defense. Marcus, oblivious to the tension, jumped in. 6-month wait list? That's impressive. You must be good. I've been looking for someone to build custom shelves for my home office. Most contractors want to use cheap materials and charge premium prices. I'd be happy to talk about it, Ethan said. I only work with quality materials, but my prices are fair. You're paying for the craftsmanship and the time, not markup for a brand name. Give me your card, Marcus said, warming to the topic. I'm serious about this. Jennifer's been on me for months to do something about that office. As Ethan and Marcus exchanged information, Jennifer pulled Victoria aside slightly, her smile fixed but her eyes sharp. Single father, trades work, community center job? Victoria, really? After Richard, I'd have thought you'd aim higher. The words were meant to sting, to reinforce the hierarchy where men were valued by their bank accounts and social connections. A year ago, they might have worked, but Victoria had spent the last few weeks watching Ethan parent his daughter with patience and love, had seen him create beautiful things with his hands, had experienced his unwavering support without any expectation of return. I did aim higher, Victoria said quietly. Ethan is kind, honest, talented, and he shows up for the people he cares about. That's higher than anything Richard ever offered me. Jennifer's smile faltered. Well, if you're happy, I suppose that's what matters. I am, Victoria said, and realized it was true. They moved through the cocktail hour in a similar pattern, encountering various people from Victoria's past who assessed Ethan and found him wanting by their particular metrics of worth. Each time, Victoria found herself defending him with increasing conviction, watching their dismissive attitudes reveal more about their own limitations than his. Ethan handled it all with remarkable grace, never defensive or apologetic, simply being exactly who he was. When Richard's college roommate made a condescending remark about the simple life, Ethan smiled and said, "It's simple in the best ways. I know my daughter, I know my work, I know what matters. Not many people can say that." The comment landed with unexpected weight, and Victoria watched the roommate flounder for a response. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Victoria murmured as they moved away. "Watching wealthy people tie themselves in knots trying to insult me politely? It's better than most entertainment." Ethan's eyes were bright with amusement. "Besides, you keep defending me like I'm something precious. I'm not going to lie, it feels pretty good." "You are something precious," Victoria said before she could stop herself. Ethan's expression softened, and for a moment the noise of the reception faded. "Victoria." "There you are!" A voice cut through the moment, and they both turned to find Melissa approaching, her wedding dress a confection of lace and tulle, her smile wide and seemingly genuine. "Victoria, I'm so glad you came. I wasn't sure if you would, but Richard said you'd always been gracious about everything." Victoria felt Ethan's hand tighten protectively on her waist. She took a breath, preparing for whatever subtext lived beneath Melissa's words. "Congratulations, Melissa. You look beautiful. The ceremony was lovely." "Thank you. And you look amazing. Richard always said you had the best taste." Melissa turned to Ethan with bright curiosity. "And you must be Victoria's date. I'm Melissa, the bride." "Ethan," he said, shaking her hand, "congratulations on your wedding. The vineyard is stunning, isn't it? We looked at so many venues, but this one just felt right, like it was meant to be." Melissa's enthusiasm seemed genuine, without malice. "How did you and Victoria meet?" "Coffee shop mishap involving my daughter and orange juice," Ethan said. "Not the most romantic story, but it's ours." "That's actually adorable. Richard and I met at a yoga retreat. I was teaching and he was there trying to find balance after—" She stopped abruptly, seeming to realize what she'd been about to say. "Well, after a difficult time. After Victoria, she meant. After the breakup had sent Richard searching for the spiritual enlightenment he apparently couldn't find in their relationship." "I'm glad he found what he needed," Victoria said, and meant it. Melissa's expression shifted, becoming more thoughtful. "Can I be honest with you, woman to woman?" "Of course." "I was worried about you being here. Not because I thought you still had feelings for Richard, but because I was afraid you'd hate me, that you'd see me as the person who got what you couldn't have." Melissa's voice dropped lower. "But Richard talks about you sometimes, about how focused you were, how driven. And I realized we're just different people who needed different things. He needs someone to slow down with him, to prioritize presence over achievement, But that doesn't make what you need wrong. The words were so unexpected, so genuinely kind, that Victoria felt her throat tighten. Thank you for saying that. Truly. Also, Melissa continued with a slightly conspiratorial smile, between us, Richard's mother has been driving me absolutely insane with wedding planning. Every time I wanted something simple, she insisted on elaborate. Every time I suggested something meaningful, she worried about appearances. So I kind of love that you brought someone who clearly doesn't care about impressing her. The look on her face when she told me about your date was priceless. Ethan laughed. Happy to provide entertainment. You're both invited to stay for the full reception, by the way. Dance, eat too much cake, enjoy the open bar. Richard wants everyone to have a good time. Melissa squeezed Victoria's hand. I really do hope you find happiness. You deserve it. She floated away to greet other guests, leaving Victoria slightly stunned. Well, Ethan said, that was unexpected. She's nothing like I imagined. I built her up in my head as this perfect yoga goddess, who was everything I wasn't, but she's just nice. Genuinely nice. Does that make it easier or harder? Victoria considered the question. Easier, I think. It's hard to resent someone for being kind. And she's right. We need different things. Richard needs someone who'll slow down with him. I need someone who understands that my drive isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's definitely not a flaw, Ethan said quietly. It's one of the things I admire most about you. Before Victoria could respond, the announcement came for guests to move into the main reception hall for dinner. They found their assigned seats at a table with several other couples, most of whom Victoria recognized vaguely from Richard's extended social circle. The dinner was predictably elegant. Multiple courses, wine pairings, everything perfectly orchestrated. Victoria pushed food around her plate, too aware of Ethan beside her, too conscious of the fact that they were playing roles that were starting to feel less like performance and more like possibility. The woman across from them, someone's aunt or cousin, leaned forward with wine-loosened curiosity. So, how serious are you two? Victoria, I remember when you and Richard were together. You always seemed so career-focused. Has that changed? The question was intrusive, inappropriate, exactly the kind of thing Victoria had dreaded. But Ethan answered before she could. Victoria is still career-focused, and it's one of the things I love about her. He said it casually, like the word love was simple and uncomplicated. She's built something remarkable, created jobs, solved real problems. Why would I want her to change that? The woman blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Well, I just meant, I know what you meant, Ethan said, still pleasant, but with an edge of steel. You meant that successful women should probably tone it down if they want to keep a man interested. But that's not how it works in healthy relationships. In healthy relationships, both people celebrate each other's successes instead of feeling threatened by them. Silence fell across their section of the table. Victoria stared at Ethan, something fierce and warm expanding in her chest. The woman's husband cleared his throat awkwardly. He's got a point, dear. Maybe we should focus on the excellent food. Conversation resumed, carefully avoiding further personal questions. Under the table, Victoria found Ethan's hand and squeezed it hard. That was, she started. Probably too much, Ethan said quietly. Sorry if I overstepped. That was perfect. No one's ever defended me like that before. Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people. The speeches began after dinner, Richard's best man delivering a humorous but heartfelt toast, Melissa's maid of honor sharing stories about their friendship. Victoria listened with detachment, like she was watching a movie about people she used to know. Then Catherine Ashford stood to give the mother of the groom's speech, and Victoria's entire body tensed. Catherine's speech was everything expected, elegant, carefully worded, full of sentiment that sounded genuine even if it wasn't. She talked about Richard's childhood, his accomplishments, how proud she was of the man he'd become. She welcomed Melissa into the family with words that dripped with the kind of approval she'd never offered Victoria. And then, near the end, Catherine's eyes found Victoria across the room. Richard has had quite a journey to reach this day, Catherine said, her voice carrying perfectly. There were times we worried he might not find someone who truly understood what it means to build a life together, to prioritize family and connection over ambition and status. But Melissa has shown him what real partnership looks like. Two people walking the same path, moving at the same pace, wanting the same things. The subtext was crystal clear. Victoria had been the wrong choice, the ambitious career woman who couldn't give Richard what he needed. Melissa was the right choice, the woman who understood that some things mattered more than corporate success. Victoria felt her face burn, felt the eyes of every person who knew about her relationship with Richard turn toward her to gauge her reaction. This was Catherine's final victory, the public confirmation that Victoria had failed where Melissa succeeded. Ethan's hand covered hers on the table, warm and grounding. Then he stood. "If I could add something," he said, his voice calm but carrying clearly through the sudden silence. Catherine's expression flickered with surprise and irritation. "I believe the family speeches are—" "I'll be brief," Ethan continued, unintimidated. "I'm not family, so I don't have the same history with Richard that everyone here shares. But I do know something about what makes a good partnership." Victoria's heart hammered. What was he doing? "A good partnership isn't about two people walking the same path at the same pace," Ethan said, his eyes on Catherine. "It's about two people choosing to walk together, even when their paths are different, even when their pace doesn't match. It's about celebrating each other's successes instead of requiring them to shrink. It's about understanding that ambition and love aren't opposites. They're both expressions of passion, of caring deeply about something." He turned slightly, looking down at Victoria with an expression that made her breath catch. "I'm grateful that Richard and Melissa found each other, that they've found a partnership that works for them. But I'm also grateful that sometimes relationships end because they make room for better matches, for people who see each other's drive as strength, not deficiency. For people who understand that you don't have to choose between building something meaningful in your work and building something meaningful in your life." Ethan sat down, and the room erupted in scattered applause that grew stronger as more guests joined in. Victoria saw Melissa beaming at them, saw Richard looking uncomfortable, saw Catherine's face frozen in a mask of barely concealed fury. "You just made a speech at my ex-boyfriend's wedding defending my right to be ambitious," Victoria whispered. "I did. Too much?" "I'm going to kiss you," Victoria said. "Right here, in front of everyone. Is that okay?" Ethan's smile was slow and devastating. "That's more than okay." Victoria leaned in and kissed him, soft and brief but unmistakably real. The kiss was for her, not for show, not for Catherine or Richard or anyone else. It was for this man who'd stood up in a room full of strangers and refused to let her be diminished. When she pulled back, Ethan's eyes were dark with something that had nothing to do with their arrangement. "We should probably talk about that," he murmured. "Later, after we survive the rest of this reception." The dinner portion ended and guests began moving to the dance floor as the band started playing. Victoria and Ethan retreated to a quieter corner of the terrace, both needing air after the intensity of the speeches. "Your mother-in-law who wasn't is going to murder me," Ethan said. "Former almost mother-in-law, and she deserved it. That speech was cruel and calculated." "It was, but I probably should have kept my mouth shut. I'm supposed to be here supporting you, not making scenes." Victoria turned to face him fully, her back to the reception, the soft glow of string lights making everything feel suspended in time. "Ethan, that was the most supportive thing anyone has ever done for me. You stood up in front of 100 judgmental strangers and defended not just me, but the idea that I don't have to change who I am to deserve love. You don't. You shouldn't. Anyone who asks you to is asking for the wrong thing." "When did this stop being fake for you?" Victoria asked. "This arrangement, this agreement we made. When did it become real?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. "Probably the first Sunday at the park, when you spent 45 minutes genuinely interested in Emma's theories about Duck Society. Or maybe before that, at the Italian restaurant when you told me about building your company and I saw the passion in your face. Or maybe the moment you asked me to do this and I said yes, because even then I knew you were someone I wanted to know better." "I kissed you," Victoria said, "in front of everyone. That wasn't part of the plan." "No, it wasn't." "I'm not sorry I did it." "I'm not sorry either." The air between them felt charged, heavy with everything they hadn't said. Victoria could hear music from the reception, could see couples dancing through the windows, could sense the wedding continuing without them. None of it seemed to matter. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone without making all the same mistakes I made with Richard. How to make room for a relationship without sacrificing everything I've built." "What if you don't have to?" Ethan stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "What if the right person doesn't ask you to choose? What if they just ask you to make room, to be present when it matters, to remember that building a life and building a company aren't mutually exclusive?" "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It's going to be complicated and messy, and sometimes we're going to get it wrong. But Victoria, I want to try. I want to take you to Sunday Park days and introduce you to Gerald properly. I want Emma to keep drawing you into our family portraits. I want to build you furniture and defend you at fancy parties, and remind you that being driven and being lovable aren't opposite things." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I have a company to run. Meetings that go late, travel for conferences, times when I'm going to be distracted and unavailable and frustrating to be around. And I have a daughter who comes first, always. School events I can't miss, bedtimes I won't compromise on, times when I'm going to be exhausted from single parenting and not the most exciting company." Ethan's smile was soft. "We both have complicated lives. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together. What if we can't? What if I'm too broken from Richard, too defensive, too—" "Stop," Ethan said gently. "You're not broken. You're just careful. And after what Richard put you through, after the way his mother treated you, you have every right to be careful. But being careful and being closed off aren't the same thing." Victoria closed her eyes, feeling his hands warm against her face, feeling the truth of his words settle into the places Richard's criticisms had carved out. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I. But I think we figure it out the same way Emma learns new things. We try, we make mistakes, we try again, and we remember that the trying matters more than getting it perfect." Victoria opened her eyes and found Ethan watching her with so much patience, so much genuine affection, that it took her breath away. "You're sure? You want this even though it's going to be complicated?" "I want this because it's going to be complicated. Easy things aren't worth having. You're worth having." From inside the reception hall, the band transitioned into a slow song, something romantic and timeless. Through the windows, Victoria could see couples moving onto the dance floor, Richard and Melissa at the center, lost in each other. "Dance with me," Ethan said. "Not for them, not for show, just because I want to hold you." Victoria let him lead her to a quiet corner of the terrace where the music drifted out, but the crowds couldn't see. Ethan pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers against his chest. They swayed together, barely moving, just existing in the same space. "Emma's going to be so smug when I tell her," Ethan murmured against her hair. "Tell her what?" "That she was right, that you make me smile more. She called it weeks ago." Victoria laughed, the sound muffled against his shoulder. "She's 6. She's not supposed to be that perceptive." "She's my daughter. Perceptive is genetic." They danced in silence for a while, and Victoria let herself feel it, the safety of his arms, the steadiness of his presence, the possibility of something she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. "I'm still terrified," she admitted. "Me too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than comfortable without you." Victoria pulled back enough to look at him, this man who'd entered her life through the chaotic medium of spilled orange juice and had somehow become essential. "So what happens now? We leave the wedding and actually try this? Actually date for real?" "If you want to. No pressure, no expectations. We take it slow, figure it out as we go, see where it leads." "I'm not good at slow." "Then we'll take it at your pace, whatever that looks like." From inside, Victoria heard applause as the first dance ended. The reception would continue for hours more, but suddenly she didn't want to be here anymore. She didn't need to prove anything to Richard or his mother or anyone else. She'd walked into this wedding, held her head high, and found something infinitely better than validation. "Can we leave?" she asked. "I know we said we'd stay until 9, but I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go somewhere quiet, where we can just talk. Really talk about what this means." Ethan's smile was immediate and bright. "We can absolutely leave." "Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere. A coffee shop, your apartment. If Emma's with her grandmother, I don't care. I just want to be somewhere real." My place, then. Emma's staying overnight with her grandmother, so we'll have privacy. Fair warning, it's small and cluttered with art supplies and probably has dinosaur toys on every available surface. That sounds perfect. They collected their things and made their way toward the parking lot, deliberately avoiding the main reception area. But as they passed through the gardens, they encountered Richard standing alone near the rose arbor, apparently taking a break from his own wedding. He saw them and hesitated, clearly debating whether to speak. Then he stepped forward. "Victoria, I'm glad you came." Victoria felt Ethan's hand tighten on hers, but kept her voice neutral. "Congratulations, Richard. Melissa seems wonderful." "She is. He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "I owe you an apology for how I ended things, what I said. Calling you cold was cruel and inaccurate. You weren't cold. You were focused, driven, passionate about your work. I just wasn't secure enough to handle being with someone whose ambition matched their talent." The apology landed with unexpected weight. Victoria had imagined this moment countless times, had rehearsed cutting responses and dignified rejections. But standing here now, with Ethan beside her and clarity finally achieved, she found she didn't need any of that. "Thank you for saying that, truly. I hope you and Melissa have a wonderful life together." Richard's eyes moved to Ethan, assessment clear in his gaze. "He seems good for you, different from what I expected." "He is good for me," Victoria said. "Better than I knew I deserved." "You deserve to be happy, Victoria. I hope you know that." "I'm starting to." Richard nodded slowly, then returned to his wedding. Victoria and Ethan walked to the car in silence, the vineyard beautiful around them, the sunset painting everything in shades of gold and amber. In the car, Ethan started the engine but didn't immediately pull out of the parking space. Instead, he turned to Victoria, his expression serious. "Are you okay?" "That conversation with Richard was surprisingly necessary," Victoria finished. "I needed to hear him acknowledge that I wasn't the problem, that wanting success doesn't make someone unlovable, and I needed to realize that I don't need his validation anymore." "You definitely don't." "No, I have someone who sees my ambition as strength, who defended me in a room full of strangers, who wants to figure out complicated instead of running from it." Ethan reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender it made Victoria's throat tight. "I'm glad you let me come with you today. Not just because it helped you, but because it showed me who you really are. How brave you are, walking into a situation that terrified you. How gracious you were to people who didn't deserve it. How ready you are to try something new, even when it scares you." "Take me home," Victoria said softly. "Yours or mine, I don't care. Just somewhere we can be ourselves without performing for anyone." Ethan smiled and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Clearwater Vineyard and everything it represented behind them. They drove through the deepening twilight, hands linked across the console, the future uncertain, but finally, blessedly full of possibility. Ethan's apartment was exactly as he described it, a modest two-bedroom on the third floor of an older building, the kind with creaky stairs and neighbors who knew each other's names. Victoria followed him up, her heels clicking against the worn wood, and felt something shift in her perspective. This was real life, not the carefully curated spaces she was used to. There were scuff marks on the walls from where Emma had probably dragged toys, a bulletin board covered in her artwork, a pair of tiny rain boots abandoned by the door. "Sorry about the mess," Ethan said, flipping on lights and quickly gathering scattered art supplies from the couch. "Emma and I did a painting project this morning, and I didn't have time to clean up before we left." "Don't apologize," Victoria said, setting her clutch on the kitchen counter. "This is perfect. It's lived in. It's real." Ethan paused in his tidying, a handful of paintbrushes in one hand, and looked at her with something warm in his eyes. "You want something to drink?" "I have wine, beer, coffee, or juice boxes with cartoon characters on them." "Wine sounds good." He poured them each a glass, and they settled on the couch, Victoria kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. The apartment was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and someone's television through the walls. It felt like sanctuary after the polished intensity of the wedding. "So," Ethan said, turning to face her, "we probably should actually talk about what happened back there." Victoria took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. "You made a speech defending me to a room full of strangers. You held my hand through the entire ceremony. You told that horrible woman at dinner that loving my career is one of the things you love about me. She paused, the weight of that word settling between them. You used the word love. I did. Did you mean it? Or was it just part of the performance? Ethan set his wine glass down and took both of her hands in his. Victoria, I stopped performing about 2 weeks ago, maybe earlier. The truth is I agreed to this because I understood not wanting to face something painful alone. But somewhere between duck ponds and art shows and watching you be brave even when you were terrified, this stopped being about the wedding and started being about you. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know how to do this. Richard was my only serious relationship, and I clearly failed at it. What if I make all the same mistakes? What if my work schedule is too demanding, or I forget important things, or I'm not present enough? Then we'll figure it out together. Victoria, look at me. He waited until she met his eyes. I'm not Richard. I'm not going to ask you to be less than you are. I'm not intimidated by your success or threatened by your ambition. What I am is interested in building something with you that works for both of us, even if it doesn't look like anyone else's relationship. What would that even look like? You have Emma's schedule. I have board meetings and investor calls. Some weeks I work 60 hours. How do we make space for each other in that? The same way we've been doing it. We find the moments that matter and we show up for them. Maybe we can't have dinner together every night, but we can have Sunday park days. Maybe you can't always be at Emma's bedtime, but when you can be, you're fully present. Maybe I can't attend every one of your work events, but when you need someone in your corner, I'm there. Victoria felt tears threaten and blinked them back. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, it's actually really complicated, but I think it's worth it. Ethan's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture grounding. Here's what I know. I like who I am when I'm with you. I like the way you challenge me to think bigger, to not settle for comfortable when I could push for better. I like watching you with Emma, seeing you discover that you're actually great with kids when you stop overthinking it. I like that you kept those wilted flowers and put them in a vase on your desk at work. How did you know they're at work? You texted me a picture, remember? There's a quarterly report visible in the background. Victoria had forgotten that detail. She'd photographed the flowers on her desk during a particularly difficult meeting, needing the reminder that something existed beyond spreadsheets and profit margins. I look at them when I need to remember that not everything has to be perfect to be valuable. See? That right there, that's growth. That's you learning that being human isn't the same as being weak. And I want to be part of that journey with you, if you'll let me. Victoria set her wine glass down and shifted closer to him on the couch, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. I'm scared that I'll disappoint you, that you'll realize I really am too focused on work, too driven, too much like Richard said. Stop letting him define you, Ethan said gently but firmly. Richard's opinion of you was filtered through his own insecurity. The truth is, you're passionate, intelligent, capable of building something remarkable while also learning to build connections with people. You came to Emma's art show even though you had an important meeting. You spent an entire Sunday afternoon listening to a 6-year-old explain duck hierarchy. You defended me to people who thought I wasn't good enough for you. You were good enough for me. You're better than anyone I've ever known. Then trust that. Trust that I know what I'm getting into. Trust that when I say I want this, I mean all of it. The late nights when you're working on a big project, the times you're distracted by a problem you're trying to solve, the moments when you prioritize your company because it needs you. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for honesty and effort and the willingness to try. Victoria felt something in her chest crack open, years of armor falling away. I want this too. I want Sunday park days with you and Emma. I want to learn how to be present without abandoning everything I've built. I want to try, even though it terrifies me. Ethan's smile was slow and radiant. That's all I need to hear. He leaned in and kissed her, and this time there was no audience, no performance, no pretense. This kiss was just for them, deep and slow and full of promise. Victoria's hands came up to frame his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin, the reality of him. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I should probably tell you something. What? Emma's been planning our wedding since the second Sunday at the park. She has very specific ideas about flowers and cake flavors, just so you're prepared. Victoria laughed, the sound surprised out of her. She's 6. Isn't she a little young to be planning weddings? You clearly don't know Emma. She's been planning her entire life since she was 4. Right now she's decided she's going to be a veterinarian astronaut artist who lives in a castle made of recycled materials and has 17 dogs. That's oddly specific. She's an oddly specific kid. Ethan pulled back slightly, his expression growing more serious. Speaking of Emma, we need to talk about how we handle this with her. She's already attached to you, and if this doesn't work out— I know, Victoria interrupted. We need to be careful. The last thing I want is to hurt her. So we take it slow with her. We keep doing what we've been doing, park days, art shows, casual time together. We don't tell her we're officially dating until we're sure this is stable. And if we ever get to the point where we're serious enough that she needs to know, we tell her together. Victoria nodded, appreciating his thoughtfulness. That makes sense? What about your ex-wife? Does she need to know that you're seeing someone? Ethan's expression tightened slightly. Sarah hasn't been part of Emma's life in over 4 years. She sends birthday cards sometimes, makes vague promises about visits that never happen. She signed away her parental rights 2 years ago so she wouldn't have to pay child support. Legally and practically, she's not a factor in our lives. That must be hard for Emma. It was at first. She used to ask about her mom constantly, where she was, why she left, if she was coming back. But kids are resilient. Now she mostly just accepts that our family looks different from other families. She has me, she has her grandmother, and she's happy. And now she wants to add me to that family, Victoria said softly. Only if you want to be added. No pressure, no timeline. We figure this out at whatever pace feels right. They talked for hours, curled up on that couch with wine slowly warming in their glasses. They talked about logistics and expectations, about what they wanted from a relationship and what they feared. Ethan told her about the carpentry business he dreamed of expanding, about wanting to eventually work for himself full-time instead of splitting his energy between teaching and commissions. Victoria told him about her 5-year plan for the company, about the new sustainable logistics initiative she was developing, about how she'd always wanted to mentor young women in business but never made the time. Why haven't you? Ethan asked. Because there's always something more urgent, a crisis, a deadline, a meeting I can't miss. What if you made it a priority? Built it into your schedule the same way you build in board meetings? Victoria considered this. I could do that. Start a mentorship program through the company, make it part of our professional development initiative. That way it's not an add-on, it's integrated into what we already do. See? You just solved it. You don't have to choose between work and other passions. You can find ways to make them complement each other. It was such a simple reframe, but it shifted something in Victoria's thinking. She'd spent so long seeing her life as a series of zero-sum choices: work or relationships, ambition or warmth, success or happiness. But what if those weren't the only options? What if she could build a life that honored all parts of herself? You're good for me, she said, echoing his earlier words. You make me think differently about things I've accepted as unchangeable. That's because you're not unchangeable. You're just someone who got convinced that growth means abandoning who you are instead of expanding into who you could be. Victoria kissed him again, softer this time, grateful for his presence and his patience and his willingness to see her clearly. When her phone buzzed in her clutch, she ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. You should check that, Ethan said. Might be important. Victoria reluctantly retrieved her phone and found 3 texts from her assistant Marcus, each one more urgent than the last. There was a crisis with their largest client, something about a shipment delay and contract penalties, and the client was demanding to speak with her personally. I have to take this, she said, already feeling the familiar pull of work responsibilities. I'm sorry, I know It's fine, Ethan said, and he seemed to mean it. Take your call. I'll make us some coffee. Victoria stepped into the kitchen for privacy and spent the next 20 minutes on a conference call with Marcus, the client's operations manager, and their logistics coordinator. She paced as she talked, her CEO voice fully engaged, problem-solving and negotiating and finding solutions. By the time she hung up, she'd averted the crisis and actually strengthened the client relationship by personally handling the issue. She returned to the living room to find Ethan had cleared away their wine glasses and set out coffee mugs along with a plate of cookies that looked homemade. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes. Crisis averted. I'm sorry I had to—" "Victoria, stop apologizing. I knew what I was signing up for. You run a company. Sometimes that means taking calls on Saturday night. It doesn't bother me." Richard used to get so angry when I took work calls during our time together. He said it showed I didn't value him. Richard was insecure. The fact that you're passionate about your work and take your responsibilities seriously doesn't mean you don't value the people in your life. It just means you're someone who follows through on commitments. Ethan handed her a coffee mug. "Did you solve the problem?" "I did. Turned a potential contract breach into an opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to customer service. The client was actually impressed that I called personally on a weekend." "That's great. See, you're brilliant at what you do. I'm not going to resent you for that." Victoria sat beside him, cradling the warm mug. "These cookies are really good. Did you make them?" "Emma and I made them this morning. She insisted on adding extra chocolate chips to every single one. Hence why they're basically more chocolate than cookie. They're perfect." They drank their coffee and ate cookies, and Victoria felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced in years. This was what partnership could look like. Someone who didn't need her to be less ambitious, who actually celebrated her competence, who understood that taking a work call wasn't a betrayal of their relationship. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "Always." "What do you want? Long term, I mean. Not for your company, but for your life. If you could build the perfect future, what would it look like?" Victoria had to think about that. She'd spent so long defining success by professional metrics that she'd never really considered personal ones. "I want to feel like I matter beyond my job title. I want connections that are real and deep, not just networking opportunities. I want to be someone's first call when something good happens, not just when they need a favor. I want—" She paused, surprised by what she was about to say. "I want a family. Maybe not traditional, maybe not biological, but people who choose me and who I choose back. People who stick around even when I'm difficult or distracted or making mistakes. That doesn't sound too much to ask for." "What about you? What do you want?" Ethan's smile was soft. "I want Emma to grow up knowing she's loved and valued, that she can be anything she dreams of. I want to build beautiful things with my hands and actually make a living doing it. I want someone to share my life with who understands that being a single parent is part of who I am, not something to tolerate or work around. And I want to be the kind of partner who shows up, who supports without smothering, who celebrates success without jealousy." "You're already that kind of partner. Even when we were fake dating, you were that." "Maybe that's why it stopped feeling fake so quickly." They finished their coffee as the night deepened, the city sounds outside growing quieter. Victoria checked her watch and realized it was nearly 11. "I should probably go," she said, though she made no move to stand. "You could stay," Ethan offered. "I have a guest room. Emma's stuff is everywhere, but the bed's comfortable. And tomorrow's Sunday. We could go to the park together, make it official that we're actually dating instead of pretending." Victoria thought about her empty apartment across the city, her pristine guest room that never had guests, her refrigerator that contained mostly takeout containers and bottled water. Then she thought about waking up here, having breakfast with Ethan, spending the day at the park with him and Emma as a real couple instead of a fake one. "I'd like that, but I'll need to stop by my place first thing to change. I can't wear a wedding dress to chase ducks." "We'll make it work." Ethan showed her to the guest room, which was indeed filled with Emma's overflow toys and art supplies, but also had a comfortable bed and clean sheets and a nightlight shaped like a unicorn. He found her a t-shirt to sleep in, one from a 5K run he'd done years ago, and left her to settle in. Victoria changed and washed her face in the small bathroom, studying herself in the mirror. She looked different somehow, softer, less armored. She thought about Catherine Ashford's words at the wedding, about the implied criticism that she'd chosen ambition over building a life. But standing here in Ethan's t-shirt in his modest apartment, she realized that she hadn't chosen wrong before. She just hadn't found the right person to build with. She slept better that night than she had in months, despite the unfamiliar bed and the sounds of the city outside. She slept with the knowledge that in the next room was someone who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. Someone who understood that she was still learning how to balance everything. Someone willing to figure it out together. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of the front door opening. Children's laughter drifted through the apartment, and Victoria sat up, confused. Ethan had said Emma was staying overnight with her grandmother. She pulled on her dress from the night before, wrinkled now but still presentable, and emerged from the guest room to find Ethan in the kitchen making pancakes, while Emma sat at the small dining table, chattering excitedly. Grandma brought me back early because she has a doctor's appointment, and Victoria! Emma's eyes went wide. You're here! Are you having breakfast with us? Victoria looked at Ethan, who gave her an apologetic smile. My mother apparently forgot to mention she had an appointment this morning. Emma, why don't you go wash your hands while I talk to Victoria for a second? Emma bounded off to the bathroom, and Ethan turned to Victoria with genuine concern in his eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't know she was bringing Emma back this early. If you want to slip out before— No, Victoria said firmly. I'm not slipping out. I'm staying for breakfast. Are you sure? We talked about being careful with Emma, not confusing her. I'm sure. We're dating now, for real. That means eventually she needs to know. And honestly, I don't want to hide. I don't want to sneak out the back door like I'm something shameful. Ethan's expression softened. Okay. Then we tell her together. After breakfast. Emma returned and insisted on helping make pancakes, which resulted in batter on the counter, the floor, and somehow in her hair. Victoria found herself laughing and wiping up spills and feeling more relaxed than she ever had in her own pristine kitchen. They ate breakfast together at the small table, Emma monopolizing the conversation with detailed updates about everything she'd done at Grandma's house, which apparently included baking cookies, watching a movie about talking animals, and having a very serious discussion about whether unicorns could be vegetarians if they ate rainbow grass. What do you think, Victoria? Emma asked. Can unicorns be vegetarians? I think if rainbow grass counts as vegetation, then yes, absolutely. That's what I said. But Grandma thought maybe rainbow grass is magic and doesn't count as regular food. Your grandmother makes an interesting point. We might need to research unicorn dietary requirements. Emma beamed at her, and Ethan caught Victoria's eye across the table with a warmth that made her heart skip. After breakfast, Emma wanted to show Victoria her room, which was an explosion of color and creativity. Walls covered in her artwork, shelves overflowing with books and toys, a dress-up corner that contained at least 3 princess dresses and a firefighter costume. This is my favorite place in the whole apartment, Emma announced. Daddy says I can decorate however I want as long as I keep it clean. I'm not very good at the keeping it clean part. I can see that, Victoria said, stepping over a pile of stuffed animals. But it's very creative. I love all your artwork. I made you something new. Emma dove under her bed and emerged with a piece of construction paper covered in glitter and stickers. It's a friendship certificate. It says you're my official friend forever. Victoria accepted the certificate with hands that trembled slightly. The construction paper was covered in Emma's careful printing, declaring Victoria Hale an official friend with all the rights and privileges that entailed, which according to the decorative border included hugs, sharing toys, and being invited to my birthday party. Thank you, Emma. This is beautiful. I'll keep it somewhere special. Like your office with the flowers? Exactly like that. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Emma, can Victoria and I talk to you about something important? Emma's expression grew serious. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart. Nothing like that. Come sit with us. They settled on Emma's bed, Victoria and Ethan on either side of her. Ethan took a breath, clearly choosing his words carefully. You know how Victoria has been coming to park days and spending time with us? Emma nodded solemnly. Well, Victoria and I have decided that we like spending time together, not just as friends, but as something more. We're going to start dating. Do you know what that means? Like in movies, when people hold hands and go to restaurants? Exactly like that. So Victoria is going to be around more often, if that's okay with you. She'll come to more park days and maybe have dinner with us sometimes. How do you feel about that? Emma looked at Victoria with those serious eyes that seemed too old for a 6-year-old. Will you still want to hear about Gerald? Always, Victoria said. Gerald is a very important duck. And can we still do art projects together? Definitely. And will you come to my birthday party? It's in 2 months and I'm having a princess dinosaur theme because I couldn't decide between them. I wouldn't miss it. Emma seemed to process this information, her small face thoughtful. Then she launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around Victoria's waist. I'm glad you're Daddy's girlfriend. You're nice and you smell good and you don't think my questions are annoying? Victoria hugged her back, blinking against sudden tears. Your questions are never annoying. They're my favorite part of park days. Even the ones about Duck Society? Especially those ones. Emma pulled back, satisfied. Can we go to the park now? I want to tell Gerald that you're staying. They spent the day at the park, and this time when Victoria sat beside Ethan on their usual bench, she leaned into him naturally, his arm around her shoulders feeling like the most normal thing in the world. Emma raced around this playground, occasionally running back to share important observations about the ducks or report on her latest feat of climbing prowess. Other parents smiled at them, this family that looked so natural together, even though they'd only just become real. Victoria felt some of them assessing her, wondering who she was, but their curiosity felt different from the judgment at the wedding. This felt like genuine interest, like acceptance into a community. You're good at this, Ethan said, watching Emma attempt to teach a group of younger children her elaborate duck naming system. At what? Being present, being here without worrying about what you should be doing instead. Victoria realized he was right. Her phone had buzzed several times with emails and notifications, and she'd deliberately chosen not to check it. For the first time in years, she was prioritizing this moment, these people, this experience of simply being alive and connected. I'm learning, she said. You're teaching me. We're teaching each other. You taught me that ambition isn't something to apologize for, that wanting to build something bigger than yourself is admirable. I'm just reminding you that you can have both, the career and the life. Emma came running back, breathless and glowing. There's an ice cream truck. Can we get ice cream? Please? I'll share with both of you. They got ice cream and sat on the grass near the duck pond, Emma between them, all three of them sticky with chocolate and completely content. Victoria took a mental snapshot of this moment, the autumn sun warm on her face, Emma's chatter mixing with the sounds of children playing, Ethan's steady presence beside her. This was happiness, not the achievement kind, not the success kind, but the simple human kind that came from connection and choice and being exactly where you wanted to be. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, they finally packed up to leave. Emma was starting to flag, the combination of early morning and park adventures catching up with her. She held both their hands as they walked to the car, swinging between them, and Victoria realized this image, this family unit they'd formed, felt more real than anything she'd ever carefully planned or controlled. At Victoria's car, there was that familiar awkward moment of goodbye. But this time, Ethan pulled her close and kissed her properly, not for show, not for anyone else, just because he wanted to. Dinner this week? He asked. Actual date? Just the two of us? My mother can watch Emma. I'd love that. Wednesday works for me. Wednesday it is. Emma tugged on Victoria's dress. You're coming back, right? This isn't like when people say goodbye and then never come back? Victoria knelt down to Emma's level. I'm absolutely coming back. Next Sunday for Park Day, Wednesday for dinner with your dad, and any other time you want me here. I promise. Okay. Because I already told Gerald you were staying, and I don't want to make him sad by lying. We definitely can't make Gerald sad. Victoria drove home with the windows down and music playing, feeling lighter than she had in years. Her apartment felt different when she walked in, still pristine and beautifully decorated, but somehow less like home than Ethan's cluttered space with its dinosaur toys and Emma's artwork everywhere. She changed into comfortable clothes and finally checked her email, dealing efficiently with the urgent items and delegating the rest. Then she did something she never did. She shut down her laptop at 6 p.m. on a Sunday evening and decided the rest could wait until Monday. Instead, she pulled out her sketchbook from college, something she hadn't touched in over a decade, and began drawing. She wasn't good at it, hadn't been good at it even when she regularly practiced, but there was something freeing about creating something just for the joy of creation. She drew the duck pond from memory, Gerald and his siblings, Emma's wild curls as she ran between swings. Her phone rang just as she was attempting to capture Ethan's profile. His name lit up the screen, and she answered immediately. "Hey," he said, his voice warm even through the phone. "Emma wanted me to call and make sure you got home safely. She's convinced that everyone she cares about needs regular check-ins." "I got home fine. Tell her thank you for worrying about me. She also wanted me to tell you that she had the best day and that she's glad you're my girlfriend and that she's going to make you a special picture for your office." "She doesn't need to do that." "Try telling her that. She's already pulled out her best glitter pens." Victoria laughed. "Then I look forward to receiving it." There was a pause, comfortable and warm. Then Ethan said, "Thank you for today, for staying, for telling Emma with me, for just being exactly who you are. I know this is all new and probably scary, but you're doing great. I had a good teacher. We're teaching each other, remember? That's how partnerships work." They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything, the conversation flowing easily, even without the pressure of face-to-face interaction. When they finally hung up, Victoria looked at her sketch and smiled. It was terrible, objectively terrible, but it represented something important. The beginning of her learning to make space for things that fed her soul instead of just her ambition. Monday morning arrived with the familiar rush of work responsibilities, but Victoria found herself approaching them differently. She delegated more, trusted her team more, and actually took a lunch break to eat something other than a protein bar at her desk. Her assistant Marcus noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked during their afternoon meeting. "You seem different. Good different, just different." I had a good weekend," Victoria said, "and I'm trying something new, actually maintaining a work-life balance instead of just talking about it." "Does this have anything to do with the wedding Saturday?" "It has everything to do with the wedding Saturday." Marcus smiled knowingly. "Good for you, boss. You deserve to be happy." The week passed in a blur of meetings and projects, but punctuated by texts from Ethan, photos of Emma's latest artwork, questions about her day, random observations that made her smile. Wednesday evening, Victoria left the office at 5:30 for the first time in recent memory and went home to get ready for her date. She chose a dress that was elegant but not intimidating, did her makeup carefully, and felt genuine excitement instead of the strategic planning that had characterized her dates with Richard. When Ethan picked her up, his expression made every minute of preparation worth it. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He'd chosen a restaurant that was nice without being pretentious, the kind of place with excellent food and warm lighting and servers who actually cared about the experience rather than just maximizing tips. They talked easily through dinner, the conversation flowing from serious to playful and back again. "I've been thinking about what you said," Victoria told him over dessert, "about integrating the things I care about instead of treating them as separate competing priorities. I'm launching a women's mentorship program at the company, official initiative built into our professional development budget." "That's fantastic. When do you start?" "Next quarter. I'm going to personally mentor the first cohort, show them that you can be ambitious and successful without sacrificing your humanity. They're lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have you. This whole idea came from our conversation on your couch. You helped me think differently." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I like being someone who helps you. And I like that you're letting me in enough to be that person." After dinner, they walked through the city, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. Victoria felt 20 years younger, like she was discovering what dating could actually be when it was with the right person. Not a strategic alliance or a path to marriage, but genuine connection and enjoyment of another human being. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan said as they stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the city lights. "Always. I was married for 3 years before Sarah left, and in all that time I never felt as comfortable with her as I do with you after a few weeks. With Sarah, I was always performing, trying to be the exciting, adventurous guy she wanted. But with you, I can just be me. The single dad who makes okay money and has paint under his fingernails and thinks a good Friday night is reading stories to his daughter." "That is a good Friday night," Victoria said. "That's better than any fancy event I've attended. Would you want to join us sometime for bedtime stories? Fair warning, Emma will probably make you read the same book 17 times. "I'd love that." They stood there in the cooling evening air, and Victoria thought about how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. She'd walked into that wedding expecting to endure a painful evening and prove she'd moved on. Instead, she'd found something infinitely better, a partner who celebrated her strengths, a child who saw past her defenses, and a vision of what her future could hold if she was brave enough to reach for it. The following months unfolded with a rhythm Victoria had never experienced before, not the frenetic pace of corporate deadlines or the empty stretches of lonely evenings, but something steadier, richer, woven from small moments that accumulated into something substantial. She found herself building a life that included both the boardroom and the playground, late-night strategy sessions, and Sunday morning pancakes, quarterly reports, and bedtime stories about magical ducks. It wasn't always easy. There were evenings when she missed Emma's bedtime because a crisis erupted in Singapore during her afternoon. There were Sundays when Ethan had to handle Park Day solo because Victoria was preparing for an investor presentation. There were moments when the competing demands of her world and his felt impossible to reconcile. But they kept showing up for each other in the ways that mattered. 3 months after the wedding, Victoria stood in the lobby of her company headquarters, waiting for the first cohort of her mentorship program to arrive. She'd spent weeks developing the curriculum, interviewing applicants, ensuring the program had real substance beyond corporate window dressing. 10 young women filed in, their expressions ranging from confident to terrified, and Victoria remembered being each of them at various points in her career. "Welcome," she said, her voice carrying the authority of experience tempered with hard-won wisdom. "Over the next 6 months, we're going to talk about building careers, navigating male-dominated industries, and developing leadership skills. But we're also going to talk about something equally important: how to build a life alongside your career, how to define success on your own terms, how to resist the false choice between ambition and humanity." One of the young women raised her hand tentatively. "I heard you started this program after attending your ex-boyfriend's wedding. Is that true?" Victoria smiled. "It is. I went to that wedding convinced I'd failed because I'd chosen my career over my relationship. But what I learned is that I hadn't failed. I'd just been with someone who wanted me to be smaller than I was capable of being. The right person doesn't ask you to choose. They help you figure out how to have both." "Did you find that person?" another woman asked. "I did. He's a single father who teaches art and builds furniture. He has paint under his fingernails and drives a 10-year-old car and couldn't care less about quarterly earnings. And he's taught me more about leadership and balance than any business book ever could." She told them about Ethan, about Emma, about learning to leave the office at reasonable hours and actually be present for the people she cared about. She told them about the women's mentorship program being her first attempt at integrating her professional expertise with her desire to give back. She told them that success wasn't about perfection, but about honest effort and the willingness to keep adjusting until you found what worked. The program met every Wednesday evening, which meant Victoria had to carefully protect that time from the encroachment of meetings and deadlines. It was harder than she'd expected, but Ethan's words kept echoing in her mind. What if you made it a priority? Built it into your schedule the same way you build in board meetings? So she did. Wednesday evenings became sacred, non-negotiable time for mentoring, and her assistant learned to schedule around them. On one particular Wednesday, 6 weeks into the program, Victoria arrived home late to find Ethan sitting on her doorstep with Emma asleep against his shoulder. "What are you doing here?" Victoria asked, immediately concerned. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Emma had a rough day at school. Some girls excluded her from a game at recess, and she asked if we could see you. I know Wednesdays are your mentorship nights, but she was pretty insistent." Victoria's heart clenched. She unlocked her door and ushered them inside, watching as Ethan gently settled Emma on her couch. The little girl stirred but didn't wake, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. "What happened exactly?" Victoria asked quietly, sitting beside Ethan. Typical kid stuff, but it hit her hard. Some girls told her she couldn't play princesses with them because she wasn't wearing the right clothes. Emma tried to explain that princesses can wear overalls and sneakers, and they laughed at her. "That's horrible." "It is, and when I picked her up, she was devastated. I took her for ice cream, talked her through it, reminded her that real friends don't exclude people for superficial reasons. But then she said she wanted to see Victoria because Victoria is strong and knows how to deal with mean people." Ethan's voice was soft. "She sees you as someone to turn to when she's hurting, That's significant. Victoria looked at Emma's sleeping face, this child who'd somehow worked her way past every defense Victoria had ever constructed. I'm glad she feels that way. I just hope I can live up to it. You already are. Emma woke about 20 minutes later, groggy and disoriented. When she saw Victoria, her face crumpled and she started crying again. Hey, sweetheart, Victoria said, pulling her into a hug. Your dad told me what happened. Those girls were wrong to exclude you. They said I'm weird, Emma sobbed against Victoria's shoulder. They said princesses don't care about dinosaurs and art, and they don't get paint on their clothes. Then they have a very limited understanding of what princesses can be, Victoria said firmly. Can I tell you a secret? Emma pulled back, sniffling. What? When I was building my company, people told me I was too ambitious, too focused, too different from what women were supposed to be. They said I should be softer, quieter, more willing to make myself smaller so other people would feel comfortable. Do you know what I did? What? I ignored them. I built my company anyway. I became successful anyway. And eventually, some of those people apologized and some of them didn't, but it didn't matter because I knew who I was, and I wasn't going to change just to fit someone else's narrow definition. Emma's eyes were wide. Were you scared? Terrified. But I did it anyway. And you know what? Being yourself, even when other people don't understand it, is one of the bravest things you can do. The girls said I'm not a real princess. Emma, look at me. Victoria waited until she had the child's full attention. You're absolutely a real princess. You're a princess who loves dinosaurs and art and getting paint on your clothes. You're a princess who names ducks Gerald and thinks unicorns might be vegetarians. You're a princess who's kind and creative and completely yourself. And any group that doesn't want that kind of princess is missing out on something spectacular. Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. I'm glad you're Daddy's girlfriend. You make me feel better. Victoria held her tight, catching Ethan's eye over Emma's head. His expression was soft with affection and something deeper, gratitude, pride, maybe the beginning of love. They ordered pizza and watched a movie about a princess who saved herself and didn't need a prince, Emma sandwiched between them on the couch. By the time the credits rolled, Emma was asleep again, this time peaceful instead of tearful. I should get her home to bed, Ethan said quietly. Or you could stay, Victoria offered. Both of you. I have that guest room, and it's late. Emma's already asleep. Ethan studied her face. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You're both here because Emma needed support, and I want to provide that. This is what we do, right? We show up for each other. They settled Emma in the guest room, and Ethan stayed to make sure she was comfortable. When he emerged, he found Victoria in her kitchen making tea. Thank you, he said, for what you said to her, about being yourself even when it's hard. She needed to hear that from someone other than me. I meant every word. She's an extraordinary kid, and anyone who can't see that is missing out. Ethan crossed to her, taking the teacup from her hands and setting it aside. Victoria, I need to tell you something. Her heart stuttered. That sounds serious. It is. I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I already have fallen in love with you. The way you show up for Emma, the way you're learning to balance your work and your life, the way you defend the people you care about, I'm completely gone for you. Victoria's breath caught. Ethan, you don't have to say it back. I'm not expecting that. I just needed you to know where I stand, what this means to me. You're not a convenient partner or a nice addition to my life. You're becoming essential, and that's terrifying, but also the best thing that's happened to me in years. Victoria reached up to frame his face with her hands. I love you too. I think I started loving you when you defended me at the wedding, or maybe before that, when you let me be exactly who I was without asking me to change. I love that you're patient with Emma, that you build beautiful things with your hands, that you see my ambition as strength instead of a flaw. Ethan kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. So where do we go from here? He asked. Forward, Victoria said simply. Together. We keep building this thing between us, keep figuring out how to make our complicated lives fit together. We keep showing up for each other and for Emma. We keep being brave even when it's scary. I can do that. So can I. The months that followed brought new challenges and deeper integration of their lives. Victoria met Ethan's mother, a warm woman who welcomed her with genuine affection and only slightly embarrassing stories about Ethan's childhood. Ethan attended one of Victoria's company events, charming her board members with his unpretentious confidence and genuine interest in their work. Emma's 7th birthday party was a chaotic celebration of princesses and dinosaurs that somehow worked perfectly, with Victoria helping coordinate activities and Ethan building an elaborate cardboard castle. There were still difficult moments. Victoria's company landed a major international contract that required her to travel to Tokyo for 2 weeks, missing Emma's school art show and 3 consecutive Sunday park days. The guilt ate at her, even though Ethan assured her it was fine, that they understood, that her work was important. "I'm failing at this balance thing," she told him over video chat from her hotel room. "I'm 12 time zones away when I should be there." "You're not failing, you're doing important work. Emma understands that. She's proud of you, actually. She told her class that her dad's girlfriend is in Japan solving big problems. I miss you both so much." "We miss you too. But Victoria, this is part of who you are. Your work matters. We don't expect you to give that up or always choose us over opportunities. We just expect you to come home when you can and be present when you're here." "I will. I promise I will." When she returned from Tokyo, jet-lagged and exhausted, she found Emma had made her a welcome home banner covered in drawings of airplanes and the Tokyo skyline copied from Google Images. Ethan had cleaned her apartment and stocked her refrigerator. They didn't demand explanations or make her feel guilty for being gone. They just welcomed her back. "I brought you both presents," Victoria said, pulling wrapped packages from her suitcase. For Emma, a beautiful set of Japanese art supplies and a book about origami. For Ethan, a set of traditional woodworking chisels from a master craftsman in Kyoto. "These are incredible," Ethan breathed, examining the chisels with reverent care. "Victoria, these must have cost..." "They're an investment in your dream. You're always talking about expanding your carpentry business. Consider this my way of supporting that." He kissed her thoroughly, Emma making exaggerated gagging sounds in the background that made them both laugh. 8 months after the wedding, Ethan's carpentry business had grown enough that he could quit his community center job and focus on woodworking full-time. Victoria helped him set up a proper business structure, introduced him to a small business accountant, and celebrated when he landed his first major commission, a full dining set for a restaurant opening downtown. "I couldn't have done this without you," he told her the night he signed the contract. "The connections, the business advice, the confidence that I could actually make this work. You absolutely could have done it without me. I just accelerated the timeline. The talent was always there." "Maybe, but having you believe in me made me believe in myself." Victoria understood that feeling intimately. Ethan's unwavering support had given her the courage to expand her own vision. Not just the mentorship program, but a foundation focused on supporting women entrepreneurs. She was learning that success didn't have to be narrowly defined by quarterly profits, that making an impact could take many forms. One Sunday afternoon in early spring, exactly 1 year after that first park day as a real couple, they returned to their usual bench by the duck pond. Emma raced ahead to check on Gerald, who'd apparently survived the winter and returned with a mate. "Gerald has a girlfriend," Emma shrieked with delight. "He found love just like you and Daddy." Victoria laughed, leaning into Ethan's side. "Gerald works fast. He learned from the best." Ethan's arm came around her shoulders, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma educate the new ducklings on proper pond etiquette. "Victoria," Ethan said eventually, his voice carrying an unusual nervousness. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." He shifted to face her more fully, and Victoria's breath caught when she saw the small velvet box in his hand. "I had this whole elaborate plan," he said. "Fancy restaurant, rose petals, the works. But then I realized that's not us. We're park benches and duck ponds and Sunday mornings with pancakes. We're real life, messy and complicated, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection." Victoria's eyes filled with tears as he opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "I love you. I love your ambition and your drive, and the way you've learned to make space for things beyond work. I love how you are with Emma, how you've become someone she turns to when she needs strength. I love that you defend me to people who think I'm not good enough for you, and I love that you're learning to believe you deserve happiness. I want to build a life with you, not a perfect life, but a real one. Will you marry me?" Victoria couldn't speak through the tears, so she just nodded frantically until Ethan laughed and slid the ring onto her finger. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. That's absolutely a yes." He kissed her while Emma shrieked with joy in the background, apparently having witnessed the whole thing. She came running back, launching herself at both of them. "Does this mean Victoria is going to be my mom?" Emma asked breathlessly. Ethan looked at Victoria, letting her answer. "It means I'm going to be someone who loves you and shows up for you and is part of your family," Victoria said carefully. "Not replacing your birth mom, but being someone you can count on. Is that okay with you?" "That's better than okay. Can I be in the wedding? Can I wear a princess dress? Can Gerald come?" Yes, and we'll see about Gerald," Ethan said, pulling them both close. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the park, Emma telling everyone who would listen that her dad was getting married and she was going to be in the wedding and it was going to be the best day ever. Other parents congratulated them with genuine warmth, and Victoria realized she'd somehow become part of this community without even noticing. The Sunday park regulars who knew her name and asked about her work and included her in their casual conversations. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Victoria and Ethan sat on his couch planning their future. "Small wedding," Victoria said. "Just the people who matter, your family, my family, Emma's friends from school." "Where?" "Here. In the city. Maybe that botanical garden where we practiced holding hands for the first time." Ethan smiled at the memory. "That feels right, coming full circle. I want Emma to help plan it. This is her day too, in a way. She's getting a new family member. She's going to want so much glitter. Then we'll have glitter, all the glitter she wants." They talked late into the night about logistics and timelines, but also about bigger questions. Where they'd live, Victoria's apartment was larger, but Ethan's neighborhood had better schools. Whether Victoria would adopt Emma legally, something they'd need to discuss with lawyers, but emotionally, the answer was already yes. How they'd handle the inevitable challenges of blending their lives more completely. "I'm scared," Victoria admitted. "Not of marrying you, but of messing this up, of falling back into old patterns where work consumes everything. Then we'll build in safeguards. Weekly check-ins where we talk about what's working and what isn't, non-negotiable time together that we protect from both our work demands. Permission to call each other out when we're slipping into unhealthy patterns." That sounds very mature and well-adjusted. I've been reading parenting books. Turns out a lot of the strategies work for romantic relationships too. Victoria kissed him, grateful for his steadiness, his willingness to do the work of building something sustainable. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of wedding planning, house hunting, and the continued expansion of both their careers. They found a house in a neighborhood halfway between their previous homes, a craftsman-style place with good bones that needed work, a backyard perfect for Emma to play in, and a garage Ethan could convert into a proper woodworking shop. Victoria's company launched the foundation, with the first grants going to women starting businesses in underserved communities. Ethan's carpentry business landed a commission from a boutique hotel chain designing custom furniture for their new locations. Emma thrived, her confidence growing as she learned that being different wasn't a flaw but a strength. She started a club at school called Princesses Who Do Science, which met weekly to conduct experiments and discuss how fairy tale characters could use STEM skills to solve problems. Victoria attended when she could, watching Emma teach her peers that you could wear a tiara and love dinosaurs, that princesses could be brave and smart and completely themselves. The wedding took place on a Saturday in October, 1 year and 2 months after Victoria had walked into Richard's wedding, convinced she'd failed at love. The botanical garden was transformed with simple elegance. White flowers, string lights, chairs arranged in a circle so everyone felt included. Emma wore a princess dress she'd chosen herself, purple with sparkles, and carried a basket of flower petals she'd promised to throw with restraint. She kept that promise for approximately 30 seconds before abandoning restraint entirely and creating what she called a magical flower storm. Victoria walked down the aisle alone, not because she didn't have family to escort her, but because she wanted to symbolize that she was choosing this, claiming this happiness for herself. She wore a simple ivory dress, elegant without being ostentatious, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that matched the ones Emma had given her that first day at the park. Ethan waited for her at the altar, tears already streaming down his face, and when their eyes met, Victoria felt every doubt, every fear, every moment of wondering if she deserved this simply dissolve. She deserved this. She deserved love and partnership and a man who celebrated her strength instead of feeling threatened by it. The ceremony was brief and personal, officiated by a friend who'd known them both as individuals and had watched them become something better together. They wrote their own vows, promising not perfection but honest effort, not sacrifice but balance, not changing who they were but growing into better versions of themselves. When Ethan slipped the wedding band onto Victoria's finger, his voice was thick with emotion. "I promise to love all of you, the CEO who changes industries, the woman who's learning to play, the partner who shows up even when it's hard, the mother figure who teaches Emma to be brave. I promise to celebrate your success, support your dreams, and remind you that you don't have to choose between ambition and love. You can have both. You deserve both." Victoria's own vows came through tears. "I promise to keep learning, keep growing, keep making space for what matters. I promise to be present for you and for Emma, to prioritize connection alongside achievement, to remember that building a life is as important as building a company. I promise to let you love me, even when it's scary, even when my old fears try to convince me I'm not worthy. I'm choosing to believe I am. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." When they kissed as married partners, Emma cheered so loudly that half the guests laughed. The reception that followed was exactly what they'd wanted. Good food, genuine conversation, dancing that ranged from elegant to silly. Emma appointed herself official dance coordinator, pulling various guests onto the floor and teaching them moves she'd apparently invented. Victoria's parents, who'd flown in from across the country, pulled her aside during dinner. "We're so proud of you," her mother said, tears in her eyes. "Not just for your professional success, but for this, for finding someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway, for building a family, for learning that you don't have to choose." "I had to unlearn some things first," Victoria admitted. "I spent so long believing that being driven meant being alone. Ethan taught me different." Her father, usually reserved, hugged her tightly. "He's a good man. He and Emma are lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have them. That's what partnership should be, mutual luck." Later in the evening, Victoria found herself at a table with several women from her mentorship program, all of whom had asked to attend the wedding. "This is what you meant," one of them said, "about not having to choose, about finding someone who celebrates your success instead of resenting it." "It is, but it takes work from both people. Ethan has to be secure enough not to feel threatened by my career. I have to be intentional enough to actually make time for our relationship. Neither of those things happens automatically." "Do you ever regret the years you spent building your company instead of focusing on relationships?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "No, because those years made me who I am. They taught me I was capable of building something meaningful, that I could trust myself to follow through on commitments. Without that foundation, I don't know if I'd have the confidence to be in this relationship. I'd probably still be believing Richard's narrative that I'm too cold, too driven, fundamentally unlovable. What changed? I met someone who saw those qualities as strengths, and slowly, I started seeing them that way too." As the reception wound down, Ethan found Victoria standing alone on the garden path, looking at the sunset. "Everything okay, Mrs. Miller?" he asked, the new name sounding both strange and perfect. "Everything's better than okay. I'm just thinking about how different my life looks now compared to a year ago. Last year, I was convinced I'd failed because Richard left. Now I'm grateful he did, because it brought me here. To you. To Emma. To this life we're building. No regrets? Not a single one. You? Just that I didn't spill orange juice on you sooner." Victoria laughed and pulled him close. Emma's coordination problems are truly a gift to us all. They stood together watching the sun set over the botanical garden, this place where they'd practiced being a couple and were now celebrating becoming a family. In the distance, they could hear Emma explaining to someone's confused grandfather why princesses absolutely could be interested in paleontology. "We should probably rescue him," Ethan said. Probably. But let's just stand here for one more minute. I want to remember this. How happy I am, how grateful, how completely certain that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Me too. The years that followed weren't perfect. There were still moments when Victoria got too absorbed in work and had to consciously pull herself back. There were times when Ethan's carpentry business demanded more hours than expected and family dinners got postponed. There were challenges with Emma as she grew older, navigating the complicated terrain of childhood and eventually adolescence with all its attendant drama. But they faced everything together, with honesty and humor and the deep knowledge that they'd chosen each other deliberately. They built a life that honored both Victoria's professional ambitions and their family commitments. She expanded her foundation, mentored dozens of women, served on boards for causes she cared about, and also made it to most of Emma's school events, family dinners, and Sunday park days with Gerald and his ever-expanding duck family. Ethan's carpentry business flourished, his reputation for quality craftsmanship spreading through word of mouth, and Victoria's strategic networking. He employed 3 other craftspeople, taught woodworking classes on weekends, and still found time to build Emma a treehouse that became the envy of the neighborhood. Emma grew into a remarkable young woman who knew she didn't have to choose between being kind and being strong, between loving art and loving science, between being herself and being loved. She had 2 parents who showed her daily that she could be all of those things at once. 5 years after their wedding, Victoria stood in another botanical garden, this one across the country, watching Emma receive an award for her science fair project on sustainable materials. At 12 years old, Emma had designed a process for turning recycled plastic into durable building materials, inspired by watching her dad work with wood and her mom navigate sustainable business practices. "That's our daughter," Ethan whispered, pride thick in his voice. "Our daughter," Victoria agreed, the possessive pronoun feeling completely natural now. She'd legally adopted Emma 3 years ago in a courthouse ceremony that Emma had declared even better than the wedding because now it's official that we're a family. After the ceremony, Emma ran to them, award in hand. "Did you see? I won!" "We saw, sweetheart. We're so proud of you," Victoria said, pulling her into a hug. "I couldn't have done it without you guys. Daddy taught me about materials and construction, and Victoria taught me about business applications and sustainability. You're both the best." "You did the work," Ethan said. "We just supported you." "That's what families do, right? Support each other?" "Exactly right." That evening, after Emma was asleep in their hotel room, Victoria and Ethan sat on their balcony looking at the city lights. "Do you ever think about that wedding?" Victoria asked. "Richard's wedding, where this all started?" "Sometimes. Mostly I think about how grateful I am that you asked me to be your fake boyfriend. Best decision I ever made. Well, second best, marrying you was the best." "I'm glad you think so, because I have something to tell you." Victoria's heart jumped. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just significant. I got a call today from a museum in Portland. They want to commission a series of furniture pieces for a new exhibit on American craftsmanship. It's a huge opportunity, but it would mean spending significant time there over the next 6 months. That's incredible, Ethan. You should absolutely do it. It would mean being away from you and Emma more than usual. I'd have to go up there for weeks at a time to work in their studio space." Victoria took his hand. "We'll make it work. The same way we've made everything else work. With planning and communication and the understanding that supporting each other's dreams is part of our commitment." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. You supported me through the Tokyo contract, through every late night at the office, through all the times my work demanded more than expected. It's my turn to support you. We'll video chat every night, I'll bring Emma up to visit on weekends when I can, and you'll come home when there are gaps in the schedule. It'll be hard, but it's worth it." Ethan pulled her close. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "Emma's orange juice incident. Never underestimate the power of childhood coordination problems." They laughed together, the sound carrying into the night, and Victoria thought about how far she'd come. From the woman who'd stood in her closet preparing for Richard's wedding, convinced she'd failed at love, to this woman who knew that success came in many forms. She'd built a thriving company and a foundation that made real impact. She'd learned to mentor and support other women without sacrificing her own ambitions. She'd become a mother without giving birth, a wife without losing herself, a leader who could be both strong and vulnerable. But more than any of that, she'd learned that the right partner doesn't ask you to choose between who you are and who they need you to be. The right partner helps you become more of yourself, celebrates your growth, and commits to building something together that honors both your dreams. Richard's wedding had been the catalyst, but what happened after was all Victoria's choice. The choice to be brave, to trust, to believe she deserved happiness. The choice to say yes to a stranger with kind eyes and a daughter who spilled orange juice. The choice to keep showing up, keep trying, keep building something real instead of perfect. And now, sitting on that balcony with her husband beside her and their daughter sleeping safely inside, Victoria finally understood what she'd been searching for all those years. Not perfection, not the absence of struggle. Just this: genuine partnership with someone who saw her clearly and loved her completely. A family built on choice and commitment, and the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. The fake wedding date had become the most real thing in her life. And somewhere in a park across the country, a purple duck named Gerald was probably teaching his offspring the same lesson, that sometimes the best things come from unexpected beginnings, and love finds you when you're brave enough to stop pretending and start being yourself.